The night Claire Weston made the decision that would change her life, she was running on 4 hours of sleep in a thermos of cold coffee that had stopped tasting like anything around midnight. She was 36 years old, a hospital pharmacist at Providence Medical Center in Portland, Oregon, and she had spent 11 years becoming the kind of woman who did not make impulsive decisions. She verified dosages twice. She documented everything. She kept her badge visible and her professional boundaries intact, and she went home to her daughter at the end of every shift without incident. That was the plan. That was always the plan. The man was behind the loading dock when she came out the back entrance at 2:47 a.m., which was 40 minutes past the end of her shift because there had been a medication reconciliation error on the fourth floor, and Claire did not leave errors uncorrected. He was sitting with his back against the brick wall and one hand pressed hard against his left side, and he was very still in the way that animals are still when they are trying not to show how badly they are hurt. She stopped. She should have gone back inside. She knew she should have gone back inside. There was a protocol for this. Security had a direct line. The ER was 40 yards away. She had a phone in her coat pocket and every number she needed. She had a daughter at home being watched by a neighbor who charged $15 an hour and who had a 6 a.m. shift at the bakery on Burnside. She had a list of reasons, all of them good. She looked at the man's face. He was somewhere in his late 30s with dark hair and a jaw that had been set against pain long enough that it had become structural. And his eyes, when they opened and found her standing there, were the particular gray of deep water before a storm. Not the eyes of a man asking for help, the eyes of a man who was past expecting it. "How bad?" she said. He looked at her for a moment. "Bad enough." She checked the loading dock. Empty. The security camera at the corner of the building was turned 11 degrees from where it should have been. Not an accident, she understood. In a distant way, someone had moved it deliberately. She checked her phone. No signal, which made no sense because she had 3 bars on this spot every night. She looked at the man again. "Can you walk?" "If necessary." "Then walk," she said. "I know a way in that doesn't go through the camera grid." She did not ask his name. She did not ask why he was bleeding in the alley behind a hospital at 3 in the morning. She did not ask about the camera or the phone signal or the 2 black SUVs that she noticed only later had been parked at both ends of the street without anyone inside them. She asked one thing as she helped him through the maintenance entrance. "Is the person who did this still looking for you?" He said yes. She said, "Then we need to move faster." That was the decision. That was the moment everything changed. She thought about it later many times, and she could never locate the exact logic that had led her from knowing better to doing it anyway. She was a woman who dealt in precise measurements, who understood that every substance had a threshold beyond which it became harmful, who had spent her career making sure the right things went into the right people in the right amounts. She had no explanation for that night except this: she had looked at his face, and the math had stopped making sense, and she had moved. She would spend the next several months learning what that decision had cost, and what it had given her, and how in the end, those were not always opposite things. The maintenance wing of Providence Medical Center at 3 in the morning had the particular quality of institutional silence that Claire Weston had learned to navigate like a second language. Different from the day's silence of empty conference rooms, different from the fraught silence of a patient waiting for results. This was the silence of systems running without human oversight, of ventilation and refrigeration and backup generators doing their work in the dark. She knew every camera, every lock, every alcove where the building's anatomy created a pocket of unmonitored space. 11 years of late shifts and early mornings had given her the building the way long familiarity gives you a person, not just the public face, but the architecture underneath. She knew, for example, that the pharmaceutical receiving bay on the lower level had an interior door that required a key card, but no secondary authentication after midnight when the overnight inventory supervisor went on break. She knew that the break lasted 22 minutes if he was alone, and 35 if his friend from the neurology ward had come down to use the vending machine. She knew that the camera covering the receiving bay had a blind spot in its lower left quadrant, approximately 4 feet wide. She used all of this, now moving the man through the maintenance corridor with his weight distributed between her shoulder and the wall, one careful step at a time. He did not complain. She noted this the way she noted everything, with the professional attention of someone whose job required her to register incongruities. Most injured people were not silent. Pain expressed itself through breathing, through posture, through the involuntary sounds a body makes when it has been compromised. This man was silent with a thoroughness that was itself a form of information, a body that had learned to contain its signals. Military, she thought, or something adjacent to it. Through here, she said, and he went without asking, which was also information. The pharmaceutical receiving bay was cold and lit by LED strips that emitted a light without warmth, the kind of light that made everything look slightly less real than it was. Shelving units ran in parallel rows to the back wall floor, to ceiling, labeled with the systematic logic she had spent her career maintaining. She guided him to the alcove at the back, where an exam table that nobody used anymore had been pushed against the wall and covered with a tarp. She pulled the tarp off. Sit. He sat. He moved like someone who had sustained the injury enough hours ago that the adrenaline had long since burned through, and what remained was the dull structural cost of it, the body running on will alone. She went to the supply cabinet she kept stocked with basic wound care materials, gauze, irrigation, saline, medical tape, suture kits for the rare emergencies that happened in this wing. She brought them back and set them on the exam table beside him. Shirt off, he looked at her. The gray eyes were steady and assessing in a way that made her feel briefly as though she were the one being examined. Then he reached for the hem of his shirt. He was lean through the middle with the kind of muscle that comes from function rather than intention, and the wound was along his left side below the ribs, a graze long and deep, the kind a bullet leaves when it passes close enough to do significant damage without embedding. She had read about these wounds in medical literature. She had never treated one. She irrigated it without speaking. He watched the top of her head. "You're not a doctor," he said, "not an accusation, an observation. Pharmacist. That's better, actually, for this." "I know," she said. She was already calculating the infection risk, the depth of the tissue damage, whether she needed to call someone with more surgical training. The wound was serious, but not catastrophic. She could manage it tonight. Tomorrow was a different question. "What's your name?" she asked. A pause, brief and deliberate. "Marcus," he said. She noted the pause, filed it. "Claire," she said, and taped the wound closed with the care she brought to everything precise and unhurried. When she was done, she stepped back and looked at him. This man who had appeared in her alley, and whose real name she probably did not have, and whose wound had been made by a bullet at some point in the last several hours, and she thought about what she was doing, and whether it was the most profoundly unwise decision she had made in her adult life. It was, she was fairly certain of that. "Who moved the camera?" she said. He looked at her. "Outside," she said, "the security camera on the southeast corner. It was rotated 11 degrees off its usual angle, and my phone had no signal in the loading dock, which doesn't happen." Something shifted in his face, not surprise exactly, more like recalibration. "Someone blocked it. My people. They were covering approaches." "Your people," she said, "were covering approaches." "Yes, and the two SUVs at either end of the street." He was quiet for a moment. "You saw those." "I walk that block every night." She folded the used gauze into the waste bin. "Where are your people now?" "Gone," he said. "The situation changed faster than expected." "The situation," she said, "in which someone shot you." "Yes." Claire pulled the stool from the corner and sat down on it because her legs had been carrying her through an adrenaline loop for the last 20 minutes, and they were beginning to object. She looked at Marcus sitting on the exam table with his shirt in his hands and new bandaging along his left side, and she made herself think about this with the methodical clarity that was her actual professional skill. She thought about Lily asleep in her bedroom on the other side of the city, with Mrs. Nakamura dozing in the armchair and charging $15 an hour. She thought about the last time she had made a decision that changed the shape of her life, which was when she had walked out of a marriage at age 31 with a 3-year-old on her hip and a credit card debt that had taken 4 years to clear. She had made that decision badly and by feel without calculation because she had run out of reasons to stay and run out of the energy to pretend otherwise. She had told herself afterward that she would never make a decision like that again. Impulsive, emotional. The kind of decision that felt like survival in the moment and looked like recklessness from the outside. She was currently hiding a gunshot victim in the pharmaceutical receiving bay of Providence Medical Center at 3:15 in the morning. She had apparently learned nothing. "Tell me something true," she said. He looked at her. "About why you were behind my building at 3 in the morning. One true thing. I'm not asking for everything. I don't want everything. But I need one thing that's real because I just put my car and my license and probably several laws on the line, and I think I deserve one true thing." Marcus held her gaze for a long moment. The LED light was merciless and he looked tired in it, not the tiredness of a single bad night, but the accumulated tiredness of someone who had been running on vigilance for a long time and had not yet found a place to stop. I was meeting someone, he said, a former associate. He gave my location to the people I'm in conflict with. I got out, but not before they found me. He paused. I ended up in your alley because it was away from the main approaches, and I needed to assess whether I was being followed. Were you? Not by the time you found me. How can you be sure? Because if they'd followed me this far, we would not be having this conversation. She absorbed this. Is there anyone you can call? My phone was in my jacket, he said. My jacket is somewhere on Morrison Street. She handed him hers. He looked at it for a moment, then shook his head. The number I need isn't one I can dial from a traceable phone. Is anything you do not traceable? The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile. Less than I'd like. Claire stood and went to the window. Not a real window, a high ventilation panel that looked out onto the maintenance yard and looked at the dark exterior of the building and thought about the next 12 hours with the same systematic attention she brought to a complex medication regimen. She had a shift starting at 7. She had a daughter who needed to be dropped at school by 8:15. She had a man with a gunshot wound in the pharmaceutical receiving bay who could not call anyone from a traceable phone and whose people had vanished and who had, by his own account, enemies who had been willing to shoot him on a Portland street at 2 in the morning. You can't stay here, she said. This room gets used at 5 when the overnight inventory comes in. I know. I'm going to make a call and get someone to cover my early inventory. Then I'm taking you somewhere you can rest until your people can reach you. After that, she stopped. After that, he said. She turned from the window and looked at him. After that, I don't know, she said. But I need to think past the next 4 hours before I can answer that question. He looked at her steadily. There was something in the look that she could not quite categorize, something that was not gratitude exactly and not assessment exactly, but some combination of both that felt like neither. Like recognition, maybe. Like the way you look at someone when they do something that surprises you in the direction of the unexpected. Why are you doing this? He said. She had been waiting for the question. She had been asking it herself in the part of her mind that ran parallel to everything else, the part that kept the ledger. I don't know, she said. I looked at your face and the calculation stopped making sense. She picked up her coat. I'm going to make the call. Don't touch anything. He didn't answer. She went out the side door and stood in the corridor and called the overnight supervisor and gave him the migraine excuse she kept on hand for situations that required a plausible reason to be unavailable at early hours. She had used it twice in 11 years. He accepted it without question because she had never given him a reason to question her before. She stood in the corridor afterward for a moment longer. She thought about Lily's face in the morning, still creased with sleep, asking if there were pancakes. She thought about Mrs. Nakamura's 6 a.m. bakery shift. She thought about the rules she had made for herself after the marriage ended, the clean, sensible architecture of her rebuilt life. She went back into the pharmaceutical receiving bay. Marcus was sitting exactly where she had left him, shirt back on, hands resting on his thighs. He had not touched anything. All right, she said, we're going. He looked at her. My car is in the staff lot on the east side, she said. There are 2 cameras between here and there. I know where they point. You know the building very well, he said. I've been here 11 years, she said. I know everything about it. She held the door. Can you walk without the wall? He stood without touching anything for support, which cost him something in the set of his jaw, and he walked to the door. Yes, he said. She turned the light off, and they went out into the corridor. The drive across the Burnside Bridge took 7 minutes at that hour. The city outside the windows reduced to its essential infrastructure, street lamps and traffic signals, and the dark surface of the Willamette below. Marcus sat in the passenger seat with his head against the rest and his eyes mostly closed, the studied stillness of a man who had learned to rest in whatever interval was available. He opened his eyes once when they crossed the bridge. Where are we going? My apartment, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Your apartment. I have a guest room. My daughter's school pickup isn't until 3:30, which gives you time to sleep and figure out what you're doing. She kept her eyes on the road. It's not a long-term offer. I'm telling you now. He didn't say anything for a while. Then you have a daughter. 7 years old, she said. Her name is Lily. She's with a neighbor until I get home. A pause. She won't see you until I know more about what I've gotten into. He was quiet again. She glanced at him. His eyes were back on the ceiling of the car. That's reasonable, he said. It's the minimum, she said. She drove. The city moved past them. The apartment building on the edge of the Pearl District came into view, its lights showing the early risers who were already up for the day making coffee and opening laptops, living the version of a normal morning that she was moving further and further away from with every decision she had made in the last hour. She parked in the underground garage. She looked at Marcus. He was watching her with those gray eyes that had the quality she kept returning to, the quality of still water, the quality of a thing that went down a long way. I'm going to ask you one more time before we go upstairs, she said. Is the person who shot you still looking for you? He looked at her steadily. Yes, he said, but not here, not tonight. She thought about this. She thought about what the word tonight implied, the temporal specificity of it, the fact that he had not said not ever. Come on then, she said. She got out of the car. He followed, and upstairs in the small apartment, with the blue kitchen tiles and the drawings Lily had taped to the refrigerator and the smell of the lavender Mrs. Nakamura always brought with her. Everything was still exactly as Claire had left it, ordinary, intact. She showed him the guest room and she told him where the bathroom was, and she stood in the doorway for a moment while he sat down on the edge of the narrow bed with the careful economy of a man who had run out of margin. Sleep, she said. He looked at her. I'm not sure I remember how. That's not something I can help you with, she said. She pulled the door half closed and went to the kitchen and stood at the window looking at the dark city, and she thought about the decision she had made 3 times in the last 2 hours, each time choosing the same direction when every practical reason said otherwise. She did not understand it. She would spend a long time trying to before she stopped trying and simply accepted that some things began in the wrong alley at the wrong hour, and the logic of them was only visible from the other side. She made herself a cup of tea. She did not sleep. Outside, the city went on doing what cities do, indifferent and continuous, and somewhere in it, the people who had shot Marcus Wren were doing whatever it was people like that did when the person they were looking for had stopped leaving a trail. She thought about that. She thought about it carefully. She was still thinking about it when the first gray light came through the kitchen window, and Mrs. Nakamura knocked softly on the guest room door with a cup of tea she had made without being asked, and Lily padded out of her bedroom in her sock feet, asking if there were pancakes, and the ordinary morning swallowed everything whole, the way ordinary mornings do when the extraordinary is still sleeping down the hall. Claire looked at her daughter's face. Yes, she said, there are pancakes. She made them standing at the stove in the pale morning light, and the apartment smelled of butter and batter and the particular safety of the domestic. And she did not let herself look down the hall toward the closed door until Lily was settled at the table with her plate and her orange juice and her 7-year-old certainty that all mornings led to good things. Then she looked. The door was still closed. She turned back to the stove. She had made a decision. Several decisions arranged like beads on a string, each one following from the one before, until the string was long enough that she could no longer see where it had started or where it ended. That was how these things went. She was beginning to understand. You did not make one large decision. You made a series of small ones, each reasonable in the moment, each slightly further from the place you had been before. And then one morning your daughter was eating pancakes and there was a man with a gunshot wound sleeping in your guest room, and the city outside the window was doing nothing about it, and you had to figure out what came next. She turned the burner off. She poured herself a coffee. She began figuring out what came next. Mrs. Nakamura left at 5:45, as she always did, with her coat buttoned and her scarf arranged, and a look at Claire that contained a question she did not ask. Mrs. Nakamura was 73 years old and had been watching Lily since she was 18 months old, and she had an accuracy about Claire that Claire had long since stopped trying to conceal things from. She said nothing this morning about the extra teacup in the dish rack. She said nothing about the closed guest room door. She kissed Lily on the top of the head and told her to be good at school and went out into the hallway, and only at the last moment did she pause and look back at Claire with an expression that said very quietly, I see what is happening and I am choosing not to make it difficult. Call me if you need me, she said. I will, Claire said. The door closed. Lily looked up from her breakfast. Why is Mrs. Nakamura being careful? Claire looked at her daughter. Lily had her father's wide-set eyes, which was one of the 2 things about the marriage that Claire did not regret, the other being Lily herself. She was perceptive in the way certain children are perceptive, not because anyone had trained her to be, but because she had been watching adults manage difficult things since before she could name what she was watching. She's always careful, Claire said. Not like that, Lily said. She was being careful in the other way. The way people are careful when something is different. Claire sat down across from her daughter at the kitchen table. She had thought about this on the drive home, how to explain the closed door if Lily noticed it, what to say and what to leave out. She had prepared a version that involved a colleague who had a plumbing emergency and needed a place for one night. It was a serviceable story. Lily was 7, not 12. It would have held. But she looked at her daughter's face and the story felt like a weight she did not want to pick up. A man needed help, she said. He was hurt. I brought him here to rest. Lily considered this with the seriousness she brought to information she was organizing. Is he sick? Injured. He's going to be okay. What happened to him? I don't know all of it yet. Lily ate a piece of pancake. Is he going to stay? Just for today, Claire said. Maybe tonight. I'm still working that out. Okay, Lily said, and went back to eating with the equanimity of a 7-year-old who had learned that her mother said what she meant and meant what she said, and that when her mother said she was working something out, she was actually working it out and not just saying words. Claire looked at her daughter for a moment. I need you to not go into the guest room, she said. Not until I tell you it's okay. Okay, Lily said. And if anyone at school asks about anything, nobody's going to ask me anything at school, Lily said with the precise accuracy of someone pointing out a logical error. Nobody at school knows about him. Right, Claire said, right. Lily finished her breakfast. Claire helped her find her backpack and her reading folder and the library book that was due on Thursday, and she drove her to Buckman Elementary and watched her walk through the doors with the half-hop skip she did at the top of the school steps, the habit she had had since kindergarten, and then she sat in the car for a full minute watching the door close behind her daughter. She drove home. Marcus was in the kitchen. He was standing at the counter with a glass of water, wearing the same clothes he had been wearing the night before, and he looked slightly more solid than he had in the pharmaceutical receiving bay, the way sleep, even a few hours of it, tends to restore a person to something closer to themselves. He had found her first aid kit under the bathroom sink and rebandaged his side. She noticed the strips of medical tape placed with a precision that suggested not the first time. He did not apologize for being out of the guest room. She set her keys on the counter. Coffee, she said. Please, he said. She made 2 cups, and they stood on opposite sides of the small kitchen, the morning light coming in from the east window and making everything very plain and clear. He looked around the kitchen, the tazu, the drawings on the refrigerator, the narrow shelf of cookbooks above the window, with the attention of a man in an unfamiliar environment cataloging. Your daughter, he said, she was here this morning. Yes, she went to school. Did she see me? No, a pause. She knows someone's here. I told her you were injured and needed to rest. He looked at her. You told her the truth. An edited version of it. She wrapped both hands around her mug. She's perceptive. A complete lie would have generated more questions than the partial truth. He nodded slowly as though this tracked with something he had observed about children in general. Then he looked back at the refrigerator, at the drawings, a horse, a self-portrait in crayon, something that might have been a fish or a bird, and something moved briefly through his face that she could not quite name. She chose not to try. Who are you, she said. Not, I mean, really, or I want the truth, or any of the phrases that preceded an accusation. Just the question asked the same way she asked a patient family member, what do I need to know to help you? He looked at her. She had expected hesitation. Instead, he set down his glass with a deliberate motion and looked at her directly. My name is Marcus Wren, he said. I run a private capital management firm called Cascade Strategic Partners. On paper, we manage venture funds for technology companies in the Pacific Northwest. On paper, she said. On paper, he confirmed. The firm is also the financial architecture for a number of operations that are not legal. She thought about this. She thought about it carefully, the way she thought about a dosage calculation that did not immediately resolve into a clean number. What kind of operations? Capital movement, primarily. He met her gaze. Not drugs, not trafficking. Money that needs to move between parties who cannot be seen moving it through conventional channels. I arrange the structure. I take a percentage. I do not ask what the underlying purpose is. But you know. I know some of it, he said. I chose for a long time not to know more. She stood with that phrase, the particular honesty of it, the distinction it drew. She had said something like it to herself last night in the kitchen, I don't want everything. She recognized the shape of it, the way a person builds a perimeter around what they know so that they can go on living inside the perimeter. What changed, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Someone decided I knew too much. Not about the money, about them, about the people above the money. He looked at the window. The man who set me up last night used to work for me. He was paid to pass my location to the Solon Group, which operates out of Seattle and has interests in 3 of the same sectors I manage for. What do they want? The same thing everyone in my industry wants when they can't buy you. He looked at her. To remove you. She held her mug and looked at him across the narrow kitchen and thought about what she had brought into this apartment. She was a pharmacist. She understood complex systems, the interactions between substances, the way a chain reaction could be initiated by a very small amount of a very specific thing at a very specific moment. She understood that some reactions once started could not be stopped by removing the original catalyst. She had been the catalyst. How long do you need? She said. He looked at her. To do whatever it is you do in a situation like this. Contact your people, arrange whatever needs arranging, stabilize. He was quiet for a moment. 24 hours, maybe 48. And then I'm out of your apartment and out of your life, he said. He said it without drama, the flat statement of a man settling a transaction. You'll have been an anonymous Good Samaritan. There's nothing connecting you to anything. She thought about the maintenance corridor, the cameras she had routed them around the staff login that had covered her access to the pharmaceutical bay. She thought about the gap between anonymous and traceable. There are ways to connect me, she said. I'll make sure they're not used. She looked at him. How? Because I'm good at what I do, he said. The version of it that keeps people from being found. She thought about this. She thought about her 11 years at Providence, her license, her daughter's school schedule, the careful, unremarkable life she had built from the wreckage of the one that hadn't worked. She thought about the phone with no signal in the loading dock and the SUVs with no one inside them. She thought about his face in the alley and the way the calculation had stopped making sense. All right, she said, 48 hours. After that, I'm going to need you to be gone. He nodded. I understand. I'm going to work my shift today, she said. The neighbor will bring Lily home at 3:30. You will not be visible when they come in, and you will not speak to my daughter until I am present and decide it's appropriate. She paused. Are those terms you can live with? He looked at her steadily. Yes. One more thing, she said. He waited. The people who shot you, she said, they don't know you were here. You said not tonight, which means there's a version of events where they narrow it down, where they track backward from wherever you were on Morrison Street and find the alley and find the maintenance entrance. She held his gaze. If that becomes a possibility, I need to know before they do. He was very still for a moment. Yes, he said. I'll tell you. She nodded. She rinsed her mug and set it in the rack and picked up her work bag from the hook by the door. There's food in the refrigerator, she said. Don't answer the door. Don't use the phone. Don't go to the window on the street side. She paused. The window on the courtyard side is fine. Nobody can see it from street level. He was looking at her with the same expression he had used in the alley, the gray-eyed attention that felt like weight without pressure, like something that was very heavy but was choosing to hold itself. Claire, he said. She stopped. Thank you, he said. Just that. No elaboration, no qualifying clause, no transactional addendum. The plain word meaning the plain thing. She looked at him. Don't thank me yet, she said. We haven't gotten to the complicated part. She went out the door. Behind her, the apartment was quiet. Outside, Portland was doing what Portland did in the early October morning. The sky, that particular silver gray, that could resolve into sun or rain with equal probability, the city going about its business with the studied casualness of a place that had decided some time ago not to take itself too seriously. She walked to her car and drove to the bridge and crossed the river and went back to work. She did it automatically the way she had done it 10,000 times the route, so familiar it required no active navigation. Her hands knew the turns. Her body knew the parking structure, the badge in the elevator to the 4th floor. She stood at her station and checked the overnight orders and verified the pending dispensations and spoke to her colleague Jana about the medication reconciliation error she had caught the night before, and she did all of it correctly without error, because error was not something she allowed herself. She did it all. And in the back of her mind, in the part that ran parallel to everything else and kept the ledger she ran through the 48 hours ahead of her, with the systematic attention of someone who understood that a plan was only as good as the assumptions it was built on. She ran through the assumptions. She found 3 places where they did not hold. She filed them away for later. She went back to work. Eaton. She was back at the apartment by 4. Lily was at the kitchen table with her homework spread out in the organized disorder of a second grader who had learned that her mother would not do the work for her, but would sit nearby and answer questions if asked. Mrs. Nakamura had already gone, leaving a note about a half-eaten sandwich in the fridge and a reminder about Thursday's library book. Claire checked the guest room door. Closed. She knocked once softly. "We're home," she said. A pause. Then from inside, understood. She went to the kitchen and sat down across from Lily. "Homework," Math Lily said without looking up. "It's easy, but the instructions are confusing." "Show me." Lily turned the worksheet. Claire looked at it. It was a problem about measurement liquid volumes, which she found mildly funny under the circumstances. She explained the instructions in 2 sentences. Lily said, "Oh," and began writing. Claire sat with her while she worked the late afternoon light coming through the kitchen window, the apartment doing its ordinary things around them. The refrigerator hummed. A bus passed on the street below. The smoke detector in the hallway blinked its red light once every 45 seconds, which it had been doing for 3 years and which she had meant to replace the battery on many times. She looked at the blink. She thought about assumptions. The first assumption that didn't hold was that Marcus Wren's people would find him before the Solon group found where he had been. She did not know enough about either entity to evaluate that assumption. She had taken it on faith, which was not a thing she was accustomed to doing. The second was that the Solon group, whoever they were, did not have a way to track backward from the alley that didn't go through public camera systems. Private surveillance was a different matter. If they had money and people and the motivation to remove a man like Marcus Wren, they had resources she could not anticipate. The third assumption was the one she had not fully named yet, the one that sat at the back of everything and refused to be organized into the ledger. It had to do with why she had done this. Not the impulse, she understood the impulse. Now she had looked at a man who was past expecting help, and she had helped him, that was comprehensible. But the choices that came after, the continued choosing. She was still choosing, sitting here at this table with her daughter doing math beside her, and a man in her guest room who ran money for people who did not want to be seen moving it. She was choosing. "Mom," Lily said, "I have a question." "Go ahead." Lily put down her pencil and looked at her with a directness she had not inherited from anyone Claire could identify. It seemed to have originated in her specifically and completely. "Is the man in the guest room going to be okay?" she said. Claire looked at her daughter. "I think so," she said. Lily nodded. She picked up her pencil. "Okay," she said. "The instructions make sense now." She went back to her math. Claire sat at the table and watched her write and thought about the third assumption and knew without being able to fully articulate it yet that it was the one that mattered most. The guest room door stayed closed until dinner. She made soup because soup was the food she made when she needed something that felt solid and manageable, and because there was a container of homemade chicken stock in the freezer that Mrs. Nakamura had left at some point in September. She stood at the stove and thought about protein and antibiotics because the wound she had treated last night was not going to stay uninfected on gauze and tape alone. She was standing at the stove when she heard the guest room door open. Lily heard it too. She looked up from her book, which she had moved to the couch after finishing her homework, and she looked at the hallway with the expression of a child who has been told not to do something and is currently deciding whether she is going to be the kind of person who does it anyway. Claire turned from the stove. Marcus was in the hallway. He had changed. She had not thought about the fact that he had no clothes, but he was wearing a shirt that was a size too large and that she recognized from the back of the linen closet where she kept the things that didn't belong anywhere, the items left behind by the marriage that she had not gotten around to removing. He had rebandaged his side again. She could see the faint line of it under the fabric, and he looked in the hallway light, more like an ordinary man than he had in any of the places she had seen him before. He stopped when he saw Lily. Lily looked at him with the calm, systematic interest of a 7-year-old examining a new variable. "Hello," she said. "Hello," he said. A pause. "I'm Lily," Lily said. "My mom said you were hurt." "I was," he said. "I'm better." Lily nodded, filing this. "My mom is a pharmacist," she said. "She knows a lot about medicine." "I know," he said. "She helped me." Lily looked at him for another moment with those wide-set eyes that missed less than people thought they did. "Okay," she said, and went back to her book. Marcus looked at Claire across the small apartment. Claire looked at him. The moment had the particular quality of the ordinary when it has been briefly interrupted by the extraordinary and then resumes slightly sharper than before, slightly more real, as though the interruption has made visible something that was always there but had not been requiring attention. Soup, Claire said. It's almost ready. He came to the kitchen without being asked and sat at the table, and she did not comment on this, and Lily did not look up from her book, and outside the Portland evening arrived the way it always did, without announcement, the sky going from silver to charcoal to black. She ladled the soup. They ate. It was in most observable respects an ordinary family dinner. A woman, a child, a man at the table, soup from the stove, the ordinary conversation of a meal. Lily describing something a girl named Priya had said at recess which had apparently been both true and unkind, and the ethical problem this created. Marcus listening with the kind of attention that was complete and slightly surprising, asking one question at the right moment that made Lily reconsider the problem from a different angle. Lily looked at him when he asked it. Huh, she said. I didn't think about it that way. Sometimes the person being unkind is the one who's embarrassed, he said. Why would you be embarrassed if you said something mean? Because sometimes people say mean things when they're afraid of something. The meanness is covering the fear. Lily ate her soup and thought about this with the visible concentration she brought to new ideas. I'm going to think about that, she said. It's worth thinking about, he said. Claire looked at him across the table. He met her gaze for a moment briefly and then looked back at his bowl. She finished her soup. After dinner, she put Lily to bed, the ritual of teeth and book and the specific pillow arrangement that had been precisely the same since age 4, and came back to the kitchen and stood across from Marcus, who had done the dishes without being asked and was drying the last bowl with a quiet efficiency that was beginning to seem characteristic. Your people, she said. Have you found a way to reach them? I have a number I can use, he said. There's a protocol. It'll take until tomorrow morning to arrange a meeting. Meeting, she said, not extraction. He set the bowl down. That's not the word I'd use. What word would you use? He looked at her. Situation management, he said. She thought about this. The situation being, she said, the situation being that someone tried to have me killed, and I need to understand why specifically now, and who within my own organization was part of it. He set the dish towel on the counter. It's not as simple as leaving. Leaving doesn't resolve the problem. You said 48 hours, she said. I know what I said, he said. He met her gaze. I'm telling you it may need to be longer. I'm telling you that because I said I would tell you before it became a problem. She looked at him for a long moment. She looked at the shirt that was too large, the bandaged side, the careful hands on the counter. She thought about the question he had asked Lily at dinner, the precision of it, the way it had made a 7-year-old think differently about a social problem. She thought about the third assumption. She was not ready to name it yet, but she could feel its shape. One more day, she said, and then we have to figure something out. He nodded. Get some sleep, she said. You're running on nothing. He looked at her for a moment with those steady gray eyes. So are you, he said. She looked at him. Good night, she said. She went to her room and closed the door and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for a while, listening to the city outside the window, the particular nighttime sounds of the Pearl District, the distant bridge traffic, the rain beginning again on the skylight. She thought about choices. She thought about the fact that she was still making them. She thought finally about the third assumption that this would remain contained, that the 48 hours would pass and Marcus Wren would be gone, and the situation, as he called it, would resolve itself somewhere outside the perimeter of her ordinary life. She sat with the assumption. She found it didn't hold, but she was too tired to do anything about it tonight. She lay back on the bed still in her work clothes, and she looked at the ceiling, and she listened to the rain, and somewhere in the apartment the guest room door was closed, and a man who ran money for people who didn't want to be seen was sleeping in the narrow bed. She closed her eyes. She slept. Downstairs on the street that she could not see from her window, a black sedan sat at the corner without its lights on. She did not know about the sedan. Not yet. The sedan was still there in the morning. Claire saw it when she came to the kitchen at 6:15 to start coffee from the angle of the window that looked down into the street below. She had checked this window before the night before, but not at that angle, and now she stood very still with the coffee grounds in her hand and looked at the car and the absence of any lights or movement and thought about what it meant. She went to the guest room and knocked. Marcus opened the door before her hand completed the second knock. He was already dressed. He had not, she suspected, slept much. There's a black sedan, she said. Northwest corner. No lights, no movement. It was there when I woke up. I don't know how long. He came to the kitchen without speaking and looked out the window from the same angle she had used, standing slightly back from the glass, which she noted and filed. He looked for about 15 seconds. They found the alley, he said. How? Private camera on the loading dock of the building across the street. He moved away from the window. It's not on the hospital system. I should have checked it. I didn't. He said this with the flat precision of someone delivering an after-action assessment, no self-recrimination in it, just the correction of a gap in the operational picture. Claire set the coffee grounds on the counter. She thought with the systematic clarity that arrived when she was frightened about what the sedan meant for the next few hours. Lily's school run at 8:15, her own shift at 9. The apartment, which was now visible to the people in that car, which meant the car now knew where Marcus Wren had gone after the alley, which meant it knew she existed. They can't know I helped you, she said. From a distance, the building has 68 units. They know you came here. They don't know which unit. Not yet, he said. So we have time before they do, she said. How much time depends on whether they have resources inside the building. She looked at him. Do they? He was looking at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize, the particular attention. That meant she had said something that had moved faster than he had expected. Unknown, he said. Possibly not. The Solon Group has strength in Seattle. Portland is peripheral for them. Then we have a window, she said. She turned to the counter and started making coffee because thinking and coffee were activities she had been conducting simultaneously for 11 years, and separating them now would not help. The meeting you said you needed to arrange. Can it happen today? I sent the protocol last night, he said. I used the building's Wi-Fi from the courtyard side window, which isn't visible from the street. The response should come through a secondary channel by 9 this morning. And if it's positive, then I can be out of here before noon. She turned and looked at him. What about afternoon? What happens to me afternoon? He held her gaze. Nothing, he said. Without a connection to me, you're a building resident with no visible relationship to anything. They'll watch the building for a few days, see nothing useful, and redirect resources. Unless they find the hospital connection, she said. He was quiet for a moment. That's a risk, he said. It's a small one. The maintenance entry I use doesn't generate an incident report unless the night staff flag it, and there was nothing to flag. You covered the pharmacy access with a legitimate work reason. I covered the time, she said, not the access specifically. There are fire medication logs. She pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. There's always a log. He looked at her. I know, she said. I deal in documentation for a living. Everything leaves a record somewhere. She poured. The question is whether their resources run to acquiring internal hospital documentation. For a peripheral target in a peripheral city, he said carefully, I would assess that as unlikely. You said that about the private camera too, she said. He took the mug she offered. Yes, he said, I did. They stood in the kitchen and drank their coffee in the particular quiet of 2 people who have said the difficult thing and are now sitting with it, and outside the sedan continued not moving. And inside the apartment, Lily slept through the alarm she had set herself, which she did every morning and which Claire corrected every morning, by standing in the doorway and saying it is time. She left Marcus in the kitchen and went to Lily's door and said it is time. Lily made the sound she always made, which was not quite a protest and not quite an acknowledgement, but sat somewhere between them. Ma'am! School drop-off was at its normal time following its normal route. Claire drove and Lily talked about Priya, who had apparently apologized that morning via text, which Lily was processing with the nuanced consideration of someone conducting a diplomatic negotiation. She said sorry, but she didn't explain why she said it in the first place, Lily said. Sometimes people can't explain yet, Claire said. The apology might come before the understanding. That's backwards. It's how a lot of apologies work. Lily thought about this for 2 blocks. Is that okay to apologize before you understand? Better than not apologizing at all, Claire said. She checked the rearview mirror. No black sedan. She had been checking since they left the building. You can accept an imperfect apology and still wait to see if the understanding comes. What if it doesn't? Then you've learned something about the person. Lily nodded. She was looking out the window at the October street, the maple trees along the parkway going gold and red, the particular October light that made everything look like it was already remembering itself. Mom, she said, is the man in our apartment dangerous? Claire kept her eyes on the road. She thought about the answer with care. He's involved in things that are dangerous, she said finally. He's not dangerous to us. How do you know? Because I'm paying attention, she said. Lily looked at her for a moment. Okay, she said. She said it the way she always said, okay, when Claire's answer satisfied her not cheerfully or dismissively, but with the considered weight of someone who had actually processed the response and found it sufficient. Claire pulled up in front of the school. Lily gathered her backpack and her library book and did the half-hop skip at the top of the steps. She drove back. She checked the rearview mirror all the way. Marcus was not in the kitchen when she returned. She stood in the entry hall for a moment listening. Then she heard him quietly in the living room. She went in and found him sitting on the couch with her laptop open on the coffee table, which she had not given him permission to use. She looked at him. I needed to check a secondary channel, he said. I cleared the history before and after. I would have asked, but you had left. Don't use my things without asking, she said. I'm sorry, direct and without hedging. The response came in. She sat down across from him. The meeting is at 11, he said. A location on the east side. My head of security, the one person I'm certain is not involved in what happened, will be there. We'll be able to move to a controlled location by early afternoon. And from my apartment, I'll leave before you need me to, he said. Late morning. I can walk from here without being seen from the street if I go through the courtyard and the service alley to the north. She looked at him. The sedan, she said. Still there this morning, he said, which is interesting. Why interesting? Because if they had a positive ID on the unit, they wouldn't be watching the building anymore. They'd have moved. He looked at the laptop screen, which showed nothing she could identify. He had done something to the display she didn't have the context to interpret. The fact that they are still watching means they have a general location and not a specific one, which means we have time. She thought about the word we. She thought about when it had started and whether she had noticed. I need to go to work, she said. I know. I'm going to be at the hospital until 5. Mrs. Nakamura brings Lily home at 3:30. She met his gaze. If you're still here at 3:30, I won't be. She looked at him. I'll be gone before noon, he said. That's a promise. The sedan, she said. I'll handle the sedan. How? He looked at her directly. By being the kind of person who knows how to handle a sedan, he said. That's not something I can explain in more detail without explaining things I don't think you want to know. She thought about that. You're right, she said. I don't want to know. She stood and picked up her work bag. Marcus, she said. He looked up. She thought about what she wanted to say and found it imprecise, which was uncomfortable for her. She was a precise person. She organized information into its correct containers and applied the appropriate protocols and knew the difference between what she knew and what she was inferring and what she was simply choosing to believe. She stood in the living room of her apartment with her bag in her hand and a man on her couch who managed money for people who did not want to be seen and who had asked Lily the right question about an unkind girl and who had used the word we without noticing. Be careful, she said, about leaving. He looked at her. She went to work. What's happening? The shift was long and specific and required all of her professional attention, which was the form of rest she was capable of total engagement that left no room for the other thoughts to move in. She checked orders and flagged a possible interaction between 2 medications a patient in the cardiac unit had been prescribed by 2 different physicians and spent 45 minutes coordinating with the attending to resolve it. She did the controlled substance count. She trained a new pharmacy technician on the morning intake protocol. She did it all correctly. Jana came by at lunch and sat on the edge of the counter with her salad container and said, "You look like you haven't slept." "I slept," Claire said, which was technically true. "How's Lily?" "Good. She's at the age where the social architecture is becoming complicated." "Second grade is brutal," Jana said. "I remember second grade. Someone told me my lunchbox was babyish, and I think about it still." "Was it?" "Extremely. It had a cartoon bear." Jana ate a forkful of salad. "You okay, though? You have the look." "What look?" "The look where you're managing something and you're doing it correctly, and you're also somewhere else at the same time." Claire looked at her colleague who had been working 3 stations down from her for 7 years, and who had the particular accuracy of someone who has spent a long time in close proximity. "I'm fine," she said. Jana nodded, which meant she did not believe her, and had decided not to press. They had an arrangement about this, which was that Jana did not press, and Claire eventually told her things usually about 6 weeks after the fact. "Okay," Jana said. She finished her salad. "Let me know if you need anything." "I will." Jana went back to her station. Claire looked at the wall above her workstation, where she kept a list of interaction tables, the systematic record of what combined badly with what the accumulated knowledge of what happened when the wrong things came together. She thought about the sedan. She thought about the word we. She thought about Marcus Wren sitting at her kitchen table, asking her daughter the right question about an unkind girl. She thought about the third assumption, the one she had still not fully named. She went back to work. She was home by 5:15. The apartment was exactly as she had left it. Lily's backpack on the hook, Mrs. Nakamura's note on the counter, the lavender smell. The guest room door stood open. The room inside was the bed made properly, the towels folded on the chair, the bathroom clean. Everything exactly as it had been before. He was gone. She stood in the doorway of the guest room for a moment. She was aware standing there of a feeling she did not immediately identify. It was not relief. It was not quite disappointment. It was something that sat between those two things, something that had no clean name in the vocabulary she was accustomed to using for her internal states. She identified it eventually standing in the doorway. It was the feeling of a weight she had been carrying without noticing it now absent, and the absence feeling like both lightness and something else. The way you feel when you put down something heavy and your arms still remember the shape of it. She went to the kitchen. On the counter beside the dish rack, there was an envelope. She opened it. Inside was a card with a phone number written on it. Handwritten precise, no name. Below the number, 2 lines. If the situation changes, use a public phone. Thank you. She looked at the card for a long time. She put it in the inside pocket of her work bag. Mom, Lily from the living room. I'm in the kitchen, she said. Lily came in and climbed onto the counter stool and looked at her mother with the wide-set eyes. Is he gone? She said. Yes, Claire said. Lily absorbed this. He was nice, she said, about the Priya thing. Claire said. Is he going to be okay? Claire thought about the black sedan on the northwest corner, which she had checked on her way in. Gone. She thought about what Marcus had said about handling it, about being the kind of person who knew how. I think so, she said. You're not sure, Lily said, not an accusation. An observation accurate and quiet. I'm not sure, Claire agreed. Lily nodded. Okay, she said. She got down from the stool. What's for dinner? Pasta, Claire said. Okay, Lily said and went back to the living room. Claire stood at the counter and put water on to boil and thought about the card in her bag and the number on it and the 2 lines that were not quite a message, but were not nothing either. If the situation changes, she thought about what situation meant. She thought about the 3 assumptions that hadn't held and the fact that the sedan had been there in the morning and was gone now, and whether gone meant resolved or meant something else. And she knew with the systematic certainty that was her particular form of instinct that she was not going to be able to answer that question from inside this apartment. She looked at the card in her mind. She put water on to boil. She made pasta. The sedan did not come back that night. But 3 days later, a man she did not recognize came into the Providence Medical Center pharmacy and asked for her by name. Not by her professional title, not for a prescription, by name in a way that meant he had known it before he came in. He smiled at her across the counter with the careful smile of a man who was delivering a message that was meant to be understood without being stated. Someone who knows you wanted you to have this, he said. And he set a small envelope on the counter and walked away. She did not open it until she was in the break room with the door closed. Inside was a single page folded once. On it, in the same handwriting as the number on the card, the sedan was sullen. They tracked the alley through the private camera as I expected. They now know the building, but not the unit. I manage that. There is a possibility, which I am working to eliminate, that they identified your employer through the loading dock footage. I need to know if you have noticed anything unusual at work. Anything at all. I will explain more when I can do it safely. I am sorry for this. I did not intend for it to touch your work. She folded the page. She sat in the break room for a full minute. She thought about the word I am sorry and the word intend and the word touch. She thought about the third assumption, the one she had never finished naming. She named it now. The assumption was that once he left, she would stop thinking about him. It had not held either. She put the page in her pocket. She went back to work. There was nothing unusual at work that day. The next morning there was. The unusual thing was a man standing outside the pharmacy window. Not inside, not at the counter. Outside in the corridor at the edge of the waiting area where families sat while their prescriptions were prepared, where there were chairs and a water dispenser, and a children's area with books that were missing several pages each. The man was standing near the edge of this area, not sitting, not looking at his phone, not doing any of the ordinary things people did while waiting. He was watching the pharmacy window. Claire noticed him at 9:40, and she noticed him again at 10:15 And at 10:30, when she went on her break, she walked past him at a slight angle, close enough to get a clear look at his face without making direct eye contact. He was in his mid-30s, unremarkably dressed with the particular quality of stillness she had learned to identify as something other than patience. She did not go to the break room. She went to the supply closet off the main corridor, which was not on camera, and she took the card out of her bag and looked at the phone number. She took the elevator to the ground floor and walked to the payphone in the main lobby, which almost nobody used anymore, and which the hospital maintained because there was a population of patients who needed it. She dialed the number. It rang once. Yes, Marcus said. She had not expected his voice to be exactly as she remembered it. There's a man watching the pharmacy window, she said. Mid-30s gray jacket, light brown hair. He's been there since at least 9:40. I walk past him, and he has the same quality you do when you think nobody's watching you. A pause, brief. You notice that? I notice things, she said. What does it mean? It means they've confirmed your employer, he said. They haven't moved yet, which means they're at the assessment stage. They want to understand your connection to me before they decide how to use you. Use me, she said. Leverage, he said. You're a potential pressure point. People who are connected to me, even peripherally, become resources for the people who want things from me. Things, she said. Cooperation, he said, with their business interests. She stood at the payphone in the hospital lobby and thought about her daughter at Buckman Elementary and Mrs. Nakamura and the lavender smell of the apartment. What do I do? She said. Nothing yet, he said. You go back upstairs and you do your job and you behave exactly as you normally would. A pause. Can you do that? She thought about the 11 years, the verification twice, the documentation, the badge visible, and the professional boundaries intact and home at the end of every shift without incident. Yes, she said. Tonight, he said. Don't go home the normal route. Take the river walk from the Hawthorne Bridge. It adds 12 minutes, but the exposure is different. He paused. Can you arrange for Lily to stay later with your neighbor? Yes, do that. Marcus, she said. He waited. I need to understand the full shape of this, she said. Not the managed version, the full version. What they want from you and what they'll do to get it and what it means for me. The pause was longer this time. Yes, he said. You do. Another pause. Tonight, 9 o'clock. The coffee shop on East Burnside, the one on the corner with the green awning. Take the river walk and come in from the east side. All right, she said. She hung up. She stood in the hospital lobby for a moment looking at the ordinary movement of the day, the family pushing a wheelchair, the nurse with the stack of charts, the volunteer at the information desk. And she thought about the shape of ordinary life and how thin it was, how thoroughly ordinary it was possible for the surface to be, while the structure underneath was doing something entirely different. She went back upstairs. She did her job. She did it exactly as she normally would. At noon, she walked past the waiting area, and the man in the gray jacket was gone. This did not reassure her. She called Mrs. Nakamura at 2 and asked if she could keep Lily until 9, which was unusual, and which Mrs. Nakamura accepted without requiring an explanation, because she never required explanations. She simply said, of course, and that she would feed Lily dinner and ask if Claire needed her to stay over. No, Claire said, just until 9, I'll be home by 9:15. Take your time, Mrs. Nakamura said, which meant she understood something was happening and had decided to make it easier. She walked the river walk from the Hawthorne Bridge in the October dark, the city lights reflecting on the water, the Willamette running fast with the recent rains. She had walked this path many times in daylight and twice in the early evening, but never at this hour, and the dark rearranged it made it both larger and more specific, the concrete path and the railing, and the lights from the opposite bank creating a corridor through the dark. She checked behind her 3 times. Nobody. She came in from the east side of Burnside Street and found the coffee shop with the green awning and pushed through the door into the warmth of it, the particular smell of good coffee and old wood floors, and Marcus was in the back corner booth. He had a coffee in front of him and an empty cup across from it, and he looked different, she thought, from the alley and the kitchen and the couch. More present somehow, though more tired, as though the days between had clarified something. She sat down. Thank you for coming, he said. You said you'd explain, she said. I will. He looked at the table for a moment, then at her. What do you want to know first? Everything, she said, the full version. He told her. He told her about Cascade Strategic Partners and what it actually was, which was a shell for the movement of capital between four criminal enterprises operating in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, and Spokane enterprises that were not drug operations or trafficking, but corruption infrastructure, the financial layer that made other criminal enterprises possible. He told her that he had built the firm over 8 years, starting with a legitimate venture background, drifting gradually further from legitimate, and that the drift had happened in increments, each one defensible in the moment, each one slightly further than the last. He told her this without excusing it. He told her about the Solon Group, which was one of the four enterprises and which had for 2 years been attempting to absorb the financial infrastructure of the other three rather than remain a client of it. He told her that what Solon wanted from him specifically was the operational architecture, the account structures, the transfer protocols, the client list, which would give them control over the entire network's capital flow. He told her that he had been refusing this for 18 months and that the shooting had been the escalation beyond negotiation. Why not give it to them, she said. He looked at her. Because the client list includes people who would be destroyed by Solon's control, he said. Not criminals, politicians mostly, city officials who took money in specific situations a decade ago and have been paying for it with access ever since. People who got in once and have been caught inside ever since. A pause. If Solon has the list, they own those people, completely and permanently. She looked at him. You're protecting them, she said. I'm protecting the situation from becoming worse, he said. There's a difference. Is there? He was quiet for a moment. Probably not as much as I'd like, he said. I've been telling myself the distinction matters for a long time. She thought about the conversation they'd had in the kitchen about choosing not to know, about the perimeter people build around what they know so they can go on living inside it. What do they want from me? She said. Your leverage, he said. If they can confirm that I used your apartment and they're close to confirming that the building access question is a matter of time, then they have a way to apply pressure, either to me through threatening you or to you directly to get information about how to reach me. I don't have information about how to reach you, she said. You have that card, he said. She thought about the card in her bag. Yes, she said. So does my number, he said, which is itself information. She sat with the full shape of it, the full version as she had asked for. She had gone into an alley and helped a man and brought him to her apartment and made soup and let him sit at her kitchen table with her daughter. She had done it with a particular form of impulsiveness that bypassed her systems, the same form that had made her leave a marriage at 31, the same form that seemed to activate when the ordinary math stopped making sense. She had done all of it, and now a man in a gray jacket had stood outside the pharmacy window for 45 minutes. What are you going to do? She said. He looked at her across the table. The coffee shop was warm, and the other patrons were doing their ordinary evening things, reading, working, talking, and she and Marcus were in the back corner, having a conversation that belonged to a different category entirely. I'm going to dismantle Cascade, he said. Not hand it to Salon. Take it apart from inside methodically so that it stops being a useful target. He met her gaze. It'll take time. Months. It means working with people I have spent a long time not working with. Police, she said. Federal, he said. There's an agent. I've been in contact for 6 weeks before the shooting. It was already in motion. She thought about this. So you were already on the way out, she said. Yes. The shooting was because Solon knew, she said. Yes, the man who set me up, he learned about the federal contact. He told Solon. They moved faster than I expected. A pause. He didn't know I was already protected to a degree. It complicated their timeline. She looked at him. Complicated, she said. Made it messier than it would have been, he said, for all of us. She thought about the sedan. She thought about the man in the gray jacket. She thought about the note with its 2 lines of careful handwriting and the word sorry in it. How long until the Solon Group stops being a risk to me specifically, she said. He held her gaze. Weeks, he said, maybe 2 months. During which they may try to use me as leverage. Yes. During which they know where I work and roughly where I live. Yes. She sat with this. She sat with the entire weight of it. This man and his careful dismantling and his federal contact in the 2 months of her daughter going to school and Mrs. Nakamura bringing her home and the lavender smell of the apartment in the black sedan on the corner. She thought about what she was going to say before she said it. She thought about it carefully. I need help, she said. Not protection. Help. There is a difference. He looked at her. I need to know what I'm looking at when I look at it, she said. I need to be able to identify the man in the gray jacket when he shows up again, because he will show up again, and I need to know what it means and what to do. I need information, not a bodyguard, not someone standing between me and a situation I can't see. She held his gaze. I can manage a situation I can see. I can't manage one I'm being kept away from. He was very still. You're asking to be brought in, he said. I'm in, she said. I've been in since I walked out of that building with you. I'm asking to be brought in to the point where I can actually function inside it. He looked at her for a long time. She looked back. All right, he said. It was the same phrase she had used in the alley and in the kitchen and in the corridor the night she had decided. She recognized it. She picked up the coffee cup across the table. The one he had ordered for her, she understood now, knowing she would come, and she drank. It was still warm. Then tell me what I'm looking at, she said. He told her. Over the next 3 weeks, they met 5 times. Always public places, always different ones. The East Side Coffee Shop, once more a Vietnamese restaurant on Division, the reading room of the Central Library, where the ambient sound and the policy of silence paradoxically made conversation more private than any booth. He told her things in installments, and she listened and asked questions and organized the information with the systematic precision that was her actual professional skill. She learned the shape of the Solon Group. She learned the name of the federal agent, a woman named Diana Park, who worked out of the Portland field office and had been building a case against Solon's financial infrastructure for 3 years. She learned which of Cascade's 4 enterprise clients were already cooperating with Park and which were not, and what the difference in risk meant for the timeline. She learned that Marcus had a house in the West Hills that he had not returned to since the shooting because it was the first place Solon would have watched. He was living out of a hotel in the Lloyd district under a name she did not ask for. She learned that his head of security, a man named Ito who had worked for him for 7 years, was the one person inside Cascade who had not been implicated in the betrayal. Ito was handling the physical protection while Marcus handled the dismantling from inside. She learned all of this and organized it into the ledger she kept in her mind, the way she organized everything with careful labels and clear separations between what she knew and what she was inferring. She also learned in the margins of the meetings the things that were not about the situation. She learned that he had grown up in Seattle and had gone to the University of Washington on an academic scholarship and had spent 3 years in legitimate finance before the first small compromise, which had seemed at the time like a single exception. He did not excuse this. He said it with the same flat precision he brought to everything this happened. This was its cost. These are the things I chose not to look at while it was happening. She told him at the library about the marriage. Not all of it. The shape of it, a man who had seemed one thing and was another, not violently, not dramatically, but in the way of a person who had never learned to be honest about what they needed, and who had decided that her competence and her self-sufficiency excused him from the work of the relationship. You left, he said. I left, she said. With Lily. With Lily. He was quiet for a moment. That was the right decision, he said. I know, she said. It didn't feel right at the time. It felt like failure. Most right decisions feel like something else first, he said. She looked at him across the library table. She thought about the alley. She thought about impulsiveness and what it looked like from the inside versus what it looked like from the outside, and the way a decision that looked like recklessness could be the most accurate thing you had ever done. She did not say any of this, but she thought it. 3 weeks after their first library meeting, Diana Park called Claire's cell phone. She had not given Park her number. Park explained briefly that she had it through the investigation and that she needed to speak to Claire in person, and that it would be better if Marcus did not know about the meeting until after it happened. Claire thought about this for 12 hours. Then she met Diana Park at a coffee shop on the north end of the Pearl District, 3 miles from her apartment and 5 miles from any location she had ever met Marcus. Park was 40, compact and deliberate, with the kind of face that gave nothing away unless it chose to. She set her phone face down on the table and looked at Claire with the direct attention of someone who has no time to be indirect. You've been meeting with Marcus Wren, she said. Yes, Claire said. She had decided on the walk over that she was not going to be careful about this. She had been careful for weeks, and careful had its limits. He's been cooperative with our investigation, Park said. His cooperation is valuable, and I want it to continue. She met Claire's gaze. I'm telling you this because you're involved now, Ms. Weston, whether you intended to be or not, and the safest thing for you and your daughter is a clear and accurate understanding of where things stand. Claire thought about the word intended. Where do things stand, she said. Park told her. The federal case was 3 months from completion. Solon's financial structure was being documented with Marcus's inside information and would be seized in a coordinated action that would also involve Canadian and Washington state authorities. The four enterprise clients were receiving varying degrees of immunity based on cooperation level. Park told her that Marcus was receiving cooperation credit but not immunity, which meant the financial structure of Cascade would be dismantled and there would be a legal process, and the outcome of that process was not certain. Claire thought about this. She thought about it with the same systematic attention she brought to dosage calculations, to the question of what the right amount of a thing was and what happened when you got it wrong in either direction. He knows this, she said, about the not immunity. Yes, Park said. He has known from the beginning. She sat with this. She sat with the image of Marcus in the East Side coffee shop, telling her he was going to dismantle Cascade, knowing the cost of what he was describing. Knowing and choosing to do it anyway. What do you need from me? She said. Nothing formal, Park said. I need to know that you understand the situation accurately. And I need to know that if anything changes, if the Solon Group makes contact with you directly, or if anything at your workplace changes, you call me directly. She pushed a card across the table. Claire looked at the card. She thought about the card in her own bag with a phone number and 2 lines of handwriting and the word sorry. She picked up Park's card. One question, she said. Park waited. Is he going to be all right? She said. In the end, after the process. Is there a version where he comes out of this? She stopped. She was not sure how to finish the sentence. Park looked at her for a moment, and something moved briefly through the professional face. Something that was not warmth exactly, but was the recognition that the question was a genuine one. That depends on a number of things, Park said. Some of which I can control and some of which I can't. She paused. He's doing the right thing now. That counts. Claire nodded. She looked at the 2 cards in her hand. She put both of them in her bag. She walked home in this October rain, the Pearl District going about its business around her, the ordinary city doing its ordinary things. She thought about doing the right thing. She thought about its relationship to having done the wrong one. She thought about the threshold she had studied all her professional life, the point at which a substance became a problem, and the question of whether you could calculate that threshold accurately enough in advance to avoid crossing it. She thought about the alley. She thought about the way the math had stopped making sense. She did not think it had been wrong what she had done. That was the honest assessment. She did not think it had been wrong, but it had cost something. It was costing something still, and the cost was not finished yet. She walked home. Mrs. Nakamura was in the kitchen making tea. Lily was at the table doing her math homework, which was about fractions now, which she found interesting because you could see the relationship between the parts and the whole. Mom, Lily said, can a fraction be more than one? Yes, Claire said. It's called an improper fraction. Lily considered this. That's a bad name for it, she said. It makes it sound wrong. A lot of math terms are like that, Claire said. She sat down across from her daughter. She thought about improper fractions, about things that were more than the containers people tried to put them in, that exceeded the expected boundaries, that didn't fit the standard definition of what they were supposed to be. She thought about a phone number on a card and the word sorry in careful handwriting. Can you help me? Lily said. Yes, Claire said. She pulled the homework sheet toward her. She helped. Outside, the rain continued and the city continued, and somewhere across the river in the Lloyd district, a man she had found in an alley was taking apart the thing he had built with the particular care of someone who understands that some things have to be undone before anything better can begin. She knew that now. She had known it for a while. She had just been being careful about naming it. The direct contact came on a Thursday in November. Claire had been half expecting it in the way you expect rain when the pressure has been dropping for 2 days. She had been watching the edges of her ordinary life for 3 weeks with the attention of someone who had been shown what to look for, and she had gotten good at it the way pharmacists get good at things, through systematic application of a teachable skill. She had identified the secondary watcher who replaced the man in the gray jacket, a woman this time early 40s, who appeared at the hospital 3 times over 2 weeks under the guise of visiting a patient on the 4th floor. Claire had documented it and sent the information to both Marcus and Diana Park. The contact was not at work, it was at Lily's school. A man was at the pickup line when Claire arrived at 3:30. He was standing near the school entrance, not in the line, watching the parents and children with the same quality of stillness she had learned to read. She saw him when she was half a block away, and she slowed without stopping, because stopping would change the dynamic. She called Marcus. Northwest corner of the school entrance, she said. 40s, blue coat. I see him, Marcus said. She had not known he would be there. She had not known he was watching. You're here, she said. Ito has been running in a rotation, he said. Since the workplace contact, you know most of this. I didn't know you were here specifically, she said. A pause. I know, he said. Claire. She kept walking. She reached the school entrance. The man in the blue coat looked at her as she came through the gate, and the look was specific enough that she knew he had her face. She went to the school office and asked them to call Lily's classroom. She did this in the measured tones she used for situations that required apparent calm, and the office administrator, a woman named Sandra, who had known Claire for 3 years, looked at her once with the particular reading of a person who has worked with parents long enough to identify which kind of calm was which. Of course, Sandra said. She made the call. Lily came to the office with her backpack and her library book and looked at her mother and then looked at the office and said with the accuracy of a 7-year-old who had been paying attention, "Is this because of the man outside?" "Yes," Claire said. "We're going out the back." "Okay," Lily said. She took her mother's hand. They went out the back entrance and through the maintenance access lane that ran along the east side of the schoolyard, which Claire had identified 2 weeks ago when she had walked the full perimeter of the building during a Saturday afternoon under the guise of a community walk event. Marcus was at the south end of the lane, and Ito, a compact, quiet man of around 50, whom she had met once, and who communicated primarily through the exact degree of attention he paid to everything around him, was behind them. They walked to a car she had not seen before, a gray hybrid, and got in. Lily sat in the back and looked at Marcus in the passenger seat. "Hello," she said. "Hello, Lily," he said. "You were at our apartment," she said. "I was," he said. Lily looked at him for a moment with those wide-set eyes. "Mom said you were going to be okay," she said. "Are you?" "I'm working on it," he said. "Okay," she said. She looked out the window. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Claire said from the driver's seat. She was watching the mirror. Ito had taken a different route. "Is it nice?" Lily said. "Yes," Marcus said. "It has a good view." The safe location was a house in the East Moreland neighborhood, a craftsman with a good front porch and a large backyard, and the appearance of a family home occupied by ordinary people. It had been arranged by Ito and was, Marcus explained, clean in the operational sense, no connection to any of the parties involved in the current situation. It also had a television which Lily located within 4 minutes and asked permission to watch. 1 hour, Claire said, and then homework. "Okay," Lily said, and settled into the large couch with the uncomplicated adaptability of a 7-year-old who had been told the situation was under control by a person whose track record on that statement she found reliable. Claire and Marcus stood in the kitchen. "How long has the school been on the rotation?" she said. "Since last week," he said. "I should have told you." Ito made the judgment call. "Tell me next time," she said. "I told you. I need to see what I'm looking at." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." She looked at him. He was standing in someone else's kitchen the way he stood everywhere, contained and specific, and he was looking at her with the direct, gray-eyed attention that she had stopped needing to interpret, having learned by now what it meant. It meant he was paying complete attention and choosing to be visible about it. She had come to find this quietly as one of the things she trusted about him. Not many, but this one. "What does it mean that they went to the school?" she said. "It means we've moved past the assessment phase," he said. "They have enough information to move. They're demonstrating capacity, showing us they can reach Lily without making a direct move yet." "Why wait?" "Because a direct move triggers Park's response protocols. They know about the federal involvement." He looked at the kitchen window. "They're trying to make you contact me first, create a channel they can monitor." "But I already contact you," she said. "Through channels they haven't been able to track. They want a clean line." He paused. "They want you frightened enough to take the path of least resistance." She thought about least resistance. She thought about the way it presented itself, the natural slope of a thing, the ease of going in the direction gravity pulled you. "I'm not going to take the path of least resistance," she said. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "What do we actually do?" she said. He told her. The plan involved accelerating the federal timeline. Park had been pushing for a controlled action before the end of the year. The school visit changed the calculus. Solon moving against the civilians, specifically against the proximity to a child, was exactly the kind of documentation that changed what Park could do with the case. "She's going to call you," Marcus said. "Probably tonight. She'll want a statement about the school contact." All right, Claire said. There's something else, he said. She waited. He looked at her with the expression she had learned to identify as the precursor to a difficult sentence, the particular set of his face that meant he was choosing words with care. The dismantling of Cascade is complete, he said. Park has everything she needs. The coordinated action is being scheduled. He paused. When it happens, the Solon Group's financial infrastructure collapses. Their ability to use you as leverage collapses with it. Another pause. But in the period between now and then, which is 2 to 3 weeks, the risk is highest. They know time is running out. That tends to make people less careful. She thought about less careful and what it meant for a man who had already sent someone to shoot Marcus in an alley. And what about you, she said, in that 2 to 3 weeks? He looked at her. I'll be in contact with Park's team every day, he said. There are federal protections in place. A pause. It's not clean, but it's the best available. And after the action, she said. After the action, there's a legal process, he said, for Cascade, for me. Park told me, Claire said, no immunity. He was quiet for a moment. You met with Park, he said. She called me, Claire said, 3 weeks ago. I told her yes because I wanted accurate information, and the accurate information was that you weren't going to be fully protected at the end of this. He held her gaze. I told you from the beginning, he said carefully, that the best I could offer was no connection to you. You said that in the first 48 hours, she said. Things have changed since the first 48 hours. He was very still. Claire, he said, I'm not asking you to explain it, she said. I'm not asking you to do anything about it. I'm telling you that I have accurate information now, and I'm deciding what to do with it from a position of knowing what I know, not from a position of not knowing. She held his gaze. That was the arrangement we made, in the coffee shop. I asked to be brought in. You said all right. Yes, he said. So I'm in, she said, which means I understand the legal process and what it might mean, and I'm still standing here. He looked at her for a long time. He said why. She had expected the question. She had been preparing the answer since the library meeting, organizing it the way she organized everything into its correct form, precise and honest. Because I looked at your face in the alley, she said, and I kept looking, and every time I did, the calculation kept coming out the same way. She met his gaze. Because my daughter asked if you were going to be okay, and your answer was, I'm working on it, and that was a more honest answer than most people give when they're not okay and they know it. She paused. Because you asked her the right question about Priya, and you didn't have to, and you did it anyway. He was very still. Those are not strategic reasons, he said. No, she said. They're not. In the living room, the television murmured. Outside, the November dark had come early the way it did in Portland, the city settling into the particular gray November evening that was its most characteristic season. This is going to be complicated, he said. Yes, she said. The legal process, he said. The outcome is uncertain. I know. I don't have a clear picture of what comes after, he said. Neither do I, she said. But I've been working with incomplete information since the alley, and I've managed it. She looked at him. I'm good at working with incomplete information. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, with the deliberate care that characterized everything he did, he reached across the kitchen counter and put his hand over hers. She looked down at their hands. She looked up at him. Okay, she said. Just that. Neither of them moved. In the living room, Lily's television show ended, and she said Mom in the tone that meant she remembered about the homework rule. Coming, Claire said. She left her hand where it was for another moment. Then she went to help Lily with her homework. The call from Park came at 8 that evening, after Lily was asleep in the borrowed house's spare bedroom. Claire sat at the kitchen table and gave a statement about the school contact, specific and precise the way she did everything, and Park listened without interrupting, and at the end said that she was moving the timeline forward and that she needed both Claire and Marcus to be available for a coordinated briefing the following morning. Is Lily safe here tonight? Claire asked. Ito has the perimeter, Park said. Yes. What about tomorrow? We'll make arrangements, Park said. I have resources for this. I know you do, Claire said. I'm asking you specifically what the arrangements are, not whether you have them. A pause. Fair, Park said, and she told her. After the call, Marcus came to the kitchen doorway. All right, he said. Yes, she said. She looked at the table, at the plain surface of it. She's moving the timeline. Coordinated briefing tomorrow morning. I know, he said. She called me too. She looked at him. The school contact one, she said. I keep coming back to the school contact. I know, he said. Not because I'm afraid, she said. I'm afraid, but that's not the part I keep coming back to. The part I keep coming back to is, she stopped. What? He said. She looked at him. The part I keep coming back to is that they thought it would make me take the path of least resistance, she said. They looked at me, a single mother, a pharmacist, ordinary life, and they made a calculation about what I would do when they demonstrated they could reach my daughter. She paused. They were wrong. He was quiet. They calculated wrong, she said, and I want to know that they calculated wrong. I want it to be real that they were wrong about me. He looked at her for a long moment. They were wrong, he said. I've known that since the alley. He held her gaze. Nobody who is going to take the path of least resistance walks out of a hospital building at 3 in the morning and brings a stranger through an unmonitored corridor because the situation required it. She looked at him. The situation required it, she said. That's what I told myself. Yes, he said, but you were the one who saw what the situation required. She thought about this. She thought about the 11 years of the pharmacist's life, the verification and the documentation, in the badge visible, and home at the end of every shift without incident. She thought about the architecture she had built and what it had been for, and whether it had been partly about not having to see what certain situations required. She thought about the alley, about the math stopping. I've been very careful for a long time, she said. I know, he said. About everything, she said. Not just work, everything. Lily's school, the budget, the apartment, the neighbor, the route home. She looked at the table. I built something very careful and very controlled, and I told myself it was for Lily, and it was for Lily, but it was also, she stopped. Also what he said. She looked up at him. Safe, she said. It was safe, and I think I had confused careful with safe or safe with good, and they're not the same thing. He was quiet. The alley was not careful, she said. I knew it when I did it. I did it anyway. She held his gaze. I think I'd been waiting for a long time for something that was worth not being careful for. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the November rain continued. Marcus looked at her across the kitchen of the borrowed house, and she looked at him, and neither of them said anything else that night. But the thing that had been growing in the spaces between the practical and the urgent was visible now, had been visible for some time, and they were both people who had learned not to look away from things that needed looking at. She went to check on Lily. He stayed in the kitchen. When she came back, he was still there. Get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Yes, he said. She went to bed. She slept. In the morning, they went to meet Diana Park. The briefing was at the Federal Building on Southwest 3rd, in a conference room with a window that looked onto the street and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly more tired than they were. Park was already there when they arrived with 2 other agents, whose names Claire was given, and immediately organized into her mental ledger alongside their functions and the specific information each of them seemed to control. There were 6 people in the room. Claire was the only one who was not in some capacity a federal agent or a cooperating principal. She was also the one who caught the problem in the operational timeline. It happened 40 minutes into the briefing. The agent named Reyes was describing the sequence of the coordinated action, the order in which different elements of Solon's financial structure would be accessed and frozen, the timing of the arrests, the jurisdictional handoffs between Portland and Seattle, and he was using a timeline that depended on a specific banking access window. Claire was listening and organizing, and she heard the window. She looked at the timeline on the whiteboard. That's wrong, she said. Everyone in the room looked at her. The banking window, she said. Western Financial Alliance shifts its automated reconciliation cycle at the end of November. If the action is scheduled for the 21st, you're inside the window. If it's the 22nd or later, the accounts will have rolled into the new cycle and the freeze protocol will work differently. She looked at Reyes. Do you have current documentation on their reconciliation schedule? Reyes looked at Park. Park looked at Claire. How do you know that? Reyes said. Because I manage a hospital pharmacy budget, she said. And Western Financial Alliance handles our institutional accounts, and last year they changed the cycle timing, and it affected our quarterly reconciliation in a way that required me to spend 4 hours on the phone with their compliance department. She looked at the whiteboard. I have the correspondence if you need it. Reyes looked at Park again. Park looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the whiteboard. She's right, he said. I should have caught that. Western Financial adjusted the cycle in 2024. He looked at Reyes. You need to move the action to the 19th or earlier. The conference room was quiet for a moment. Reyes wrote something on the timeline. Park looked at Claire with the expression of someone recalibrating an assessment. Do you want to stay in the room? She said. Yes, Claire said. She stayed in the room. For the remaining 3 hours of the briefing, she listened and organized, and twice more identified gaps or inconsistencies in the operational picture, once in the documentation chain for the Vancouver component of the financial network, once in the timing of the notification sequence for the Portland city officials whose names were in Marcus's files. She was not doing this to be useful. She was doing it because the information mattered, and she saw it. And the professional habit of 11 years was when you see an error, you correct it. At the end of the briefing, Park walked her to the elevator. The banking window would have cost us the entire Vancouver component, Park said. I know, Claire said. How did you never mind, Park said. You notice things. Yes, Claire said. That's been established. Park looked at her with that professional face that occasionally lets something through. The legal process for Cascade, Park said. I can tell you because it's accurate that Marcus's level of cooperation is exceptional and that his proactive disclosure of the political client list, which he did not have to do and which significantly expands the scope of what we can do, will be treated accordingly. She paused. I can't promise outcome, but I can tell you that the people who will make the decisions are people who understand the difference between someone who built a system and someone who helped tear it down. Claire looked at her. Thank you, she said. He asked me not to tell you, Park said. The political client list. He said it wasn't relevant to what you needed to know. Claire thought about this. He was wrong about that, she said. Yes, Park said. I thought so too. The elevator came. She went back to the borrowed house. Lily was with Ito in the backyard doing something involving a pile of fallen leaves that had clearly escalated from raking into a construction project of some kind. Ito was participating with the focused gravity of a man who took all tasks seriously, including the engineering of leaf structures. Claire stood on the back porch and watched them. She thought about the political client list, about Marcus disclosing names he had protected for years, taking apart the last of the architecture, removing the last piece that could have been leverage for him in negotiations with Park's office. She thought about choices made in advance of the conversation, where they would have mattered, choices that were already done by the time she knew about them. She thought about what it meant. She thought she knew. She went back to the apartment that evening with Ito following in the car behind hers. Marcus was in the borrowed house. They had agreed practically logistically that the Eastmoreland house was more secure for the remaining 2 weeks of the operational period. But Claire was not prepared to pull Lily entirely from her school routine and her lavender-smelling apartment for 2 weeks when the risk level Park had assessed was elevated but not immediate. She compromised. She went home. Ito's rotation covered the building. She changed the route she walked from the parking garage to the apartment entrance. She made dinner. She helped Lily with homework about fractions, which Lily now found interesting because of the improper ones. She sat at the kitchen table after Lily was in bed and looked at the apartment, the blue tiles, the drawings on the refrigerator, the narrow shelf of cookbooks, the smoke detector blinking its patient red every 45 seconds. She had been in this apartment for 4 years. She had made it carefully this life. She had furnished it with the deliberate intentions of a person who had learned what she needed and what she didn't, and had tried to build something that contained the first and excluded the second. She looked at the refrigerator. On it, alongside the drawings, the horse, the self-portrait, the ambiguous bird or fish, there was a new addition she had not noticed before. Lily had taped a drawing there at some point in the last several days, a piece of paper from the pad she kept beside her bed for middle-of-the-night inspirations. Claire got up and looked at it. It was in Lily's careful and somewhat disproportionate crayon, 3 figures, a woman, a child, and a man. The man was rendered with gray crayon for his eyes, which Lily had colored with the thoughtful attention of a child who was accurate about details she found important. Underneath, in her second-grade handwriting, us plus the man from the alley. Claire looked at this for a long time. She took a photograph of it with her phone. She went to her room and sat on the edge of the bed. She thought about us, which was a word her daughter had chosen with the uncomplicated accuracy of someone who had not yet learned that the word had complicated implications. She texted Marcus. She sent him the photograph. She waited. 3 minutes later, her phone showed that the message had been read. A minute after that, he replied with 2 words. She's right. She set the phone down. She looked at the ceiling. She thought about the third assumption and how many times it had failed to hold and what that meant about the thing it had been an assumption about. She lay back on the bed. She did not tell herself not to think about it. She thought about it. She thought about all of it, the alley and the kitchen and the coffee shop and the library and the borrowed house and the federal building conference room and the way the banking window had been wrong and how she had known it was wrong. She thought about Lily's drawing and the word us in gray crayon for eyes. She thought about the impulsive decision and the series of smaller ones that followed it, each one leading to the next, the string of beads that had become without her fully noticing a life that contained more than it had before. She thought about careful. She thought about safe. She thought about the difference. She thought about all of it until she felt the shape of it settle, not resolved into a clean answer, but settled the way difficult things sometimes settle, not finished, but known. Located in the ledger at last in the right place with the right label. She closed her eyes. She slept. Yeah? The action happened on the 19th as rescheduled. Claire learned about it from Park, who called at 7 in the morning with the particular tone of a person delivering information that is better than it could have been. It's done, Park said. All components. The Seattle assets are frozen. The Portland accounts are in federal custody. 3 arrests overnight, 2 more pending in Vancouver. A pause. Marcus is currently at the Portland field office, voluntary. Is he all right? Claire said. He's fine, Park said. He'll be there most of the day, formalizing cooperation documentation. She paused. He asked me to tell you he'd call when it was done. Okay, Claire said. She made Lily's breakfast. She walked her to school. She drove to the hospital and worked her shift with the same systematic attention she always brought, and she checked her phone at noon and at 2 and at 4, and Marcus called at 5:15 as she was walking to her car. It's done, he said. Park told me, she said. Are you? Fine, he said. I'm outside the field office. I need to go back in tomorrow for more documentation. The legal process starts next week. I know, she said. Park explained the timeline. Claire, he said. Marcus, she said. A pause. Can I come by tonight? He said. I don't need to stay. I just want to see you. She thought about the apartment and the blue tiles and the drawing on the refrigerator. Yes, she said. Come for dinner. He came at 7. Lily answered the door with the immediate practical question of whether he wanted juice because she was having juice and there was extra, and Marcus said yes and came in and sat down at the kitchen table, and Claire stood at the stove making pasta and thought about how ordinary it looked and how completely different from ordinary it actually was, and how those two things were not a contradiction. Dinner was again an ordinary meal. Lily described a project about weather systems she was working on in science class, which had led her to the discovery that Portland was technically a semi-arid climate, being kept wet by the mountains, which she found philosophically unsettling. It's pretending to be something it's not, Lily said. Or it's being shaped by its surroundings, Marcus said. Lily considered this. Is that better? She said. Everything is shaped by its surroundings, he said. That doesn't make it less real. Lily ate her pasta. I guess that's true, she said. After dinner, Lily went to bed with the efficiency of a child who had assessed the room and understood that the adults needed some time. She said goodnight to both of them with the careful neutrality of someone performing a social function they had decided was important. The kitchen was quiet. Claire sat across from Marcus. She looked at him. The gray-eyed stillness, the tiredness that was old and acknowledged, and carried the shirt that fit correctly this time, because somewhere in the last month he had managed to retrieve his own things from wherever they had been. The political client list, she said. He looked at her. Park told me you disclosed it, she said, that you didn't have to. He was quiet for a moment. I had to, he said. Strategically, no, she said. Legally, no, Park confirmed that. Not legally, he said. No, he looked at the table. But I've been making a distinction for 8 years between what I could technically avoid knowing and what I actually knew. Between the perimeter I built and what was happening outside it. He looked up at her. I'm done making that distinction. She thought about the alley, about the questions she had asked herself in the kitchen. Why are you doing this? And the answer she had finally named. She thought about choosing not to know and the cost of that and what it looked like when you stopped. The legal process, she said, is what it is, he said. I can't tell you how it comes out. I can tell you I'm not in it the way I was in everything else for 8 years doing the minimum, protecting the perimeter. He met her gaze. I'm telling them everything. All of it, whatever it costs. She looked at him. She thought about the photograph she had sent him and the 2 words he had sent back. She thought about a 7-year-old girl with gray crayon for eyes. Okay, she said. He looked at her. That's not enough of an answer, he said. I know it isn't. It's enough for tonight, she said. The full answer is going to take longer than tonight. He held her gaze. How long, he said. She thought about it. She thought about careful and safe and the difference in the string of beads that had become the shape of the last 2 months in the drawing on the refrigerator. I don't know, she said, however long it takes. She met his gaze. But I'm going to be here while we find out. He looked at her for a long time. So am I, he said. The kitchen was warm and quiet, and outside the November rain continued its patient work on the city, and inside the apartment on the Pearl District's edge, everything was exactly what it was: ordinary and complicated and real. She got up and poured them both coffee. She sat back down. They sat. Outside, Portland did what it always did, and inside, two people who had both spent a long time being careful about different things sat in an ordinary kitchen and let themselves be in the same room without managing it. That was enough. For now, that was enough. The weeks that followed were a different kind of complicated. The Solon Grower Group's collapse, documented and accelerating, did not mean the end of operational attention. Park's team maintained a reduced presence in Claire's daily life through December because the dismantling of a criminal financial network, however thorough, generated loose ends, and loose ends were dangerous in proportion to their desperation. There were 3 men in Seattle who had not been arrested and whose whereabouts were not currently known. There was a Canadian component that was being handled by authorities in Vancouver but was not fully resolved. There was the question of the political client list, which had created its own legal and public relations situation that was unfolding in ways that were important and messy and not yet complete. Claire learned to hold all of this. She organized it and kept it updated and continued going to work and making dinner and helping with homework about fractions and weather systems, and she did not pretend that the situation was over because it was not over. And she did not pretend to be less afraid than she was because fear was useful information, and discarding useful information was a form of negligence she could not afford. She also continued because the situation had changed but not resolved to meet Marcus. Not every day. Not in the borrowed house which had been vacated. Sometimes at the coffee shop on Burnside, sometimes at the apartment, sometimes at the federal building, when Park needed both of them for documentation sessions. They developed the patterns of people who are learning the shape of each other in the context of an ongoing situation, not the romantic scaffolding of normal courtship dinners and movies, and the deliberate presentation of a best version of yourself, but the more durable knowledge of two people who had seen each other in the difficult middle of things. She had seen him in the pharmaceutical receiving bay at 3 in the morning in pain and contained. He had seen her making decisions she could not fully justify under the fluorescent LED light. She had seen him with Lily and Lily's homework questions. He had seen her in the conference room finding the error in the banking timeline. And afterward, Park had said she noticed things, and he had looked at her and not been surprised. They had seen each other. That was the foundation. In December, after the legal process formalized and the specific contours of what the outcome might be became clearer. Not certain, but clear even, the range of possibility narrowing into something she could actually plan around. She sat across from him in the Burnside coffee shop and said, "I'm not waiting for the outcome to decide." He looked at her. "I already decided," she said. "I decided at the kitchen table in the borrowed house when you told me about the political client list, and I've been letting time pass because that seemed like the responsible thing to do. And I've decided I'm done letting time pass on things I've already decided." He was quiet. "Claire," he said. "Marcus," she said. "The outcome of the legal process," he said, "is uncertain. It could mean—" "I know what it could mean," she said. "I have a complete picture. I told you I needed a complete picture, and I have one. I'm making a decision with the complete picture and not with the managed version." He looked at her for a long moment. She looked back. She thought about impulsiveness and what it meant and what it cost, and how a decision could look like impulsiveness from the outside and still be the most accurate thing you had ever done. "I need you to know," he said, "that what I had before the life I built, how I built it, is not something I'm going to reconstruct. I'm going to do something different. I don't know exactly what yet." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking you to know yet. But I need to know," he said. I need to know what I'm building instead." She looked at him. "Then figure it out," she said. "I'll be here while you figure it out." She met his gaze. "But stop treating the uncertainty as a reason not to say what we both know." He held her gaze. The coffee shop did its ordinary things around them, the espresso machine, and the murmured conversations in the rain against the window. "I know," he said, "what we both know." "Yes," she said. "I've known for a long time," he said. Since the kitchen table probably, before. Yes, she said. Me too. He reached across the table. She took his hand. They sat with it for a moment, the plain fact of it, simple and warm, and belonging to no category either of them had expected to be in. This is going to be complicated, he said. Everything interesting is complicated, she said. He looked at her. The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was close, closer than she had ever seen it, and she recognized it as a thing that was still becoming, still finding its shape like most things that were real. She kept his hand. Let's go back, she said. Lily's going to want help with the weather systems project. The one about Portland, he said. Being shaped by its surroundings, she said. And not being less real for it, he said. Yes, she said. They left the coffee shop. They walked back through the December rain to the apartment where Lily was doing homework about the particular meteorology of a city that was more complicated than it looked. And Marcus sat down at the table across from a 7-year-old who had drawn him with gray crayon for his eyes and put him in the category of us. And Claire stood at the stove making tea and thought about all the things she had built carefully and all the things she had not planned for and the way the unplanned ones had turned out to be the ones that mattered. She did not think she had been wrong to be careful. She thought she had been wrong to confuse careful with safe. They were not the same thing. Being in this kitchen with this man with her daughter asking about precipitation patterns, this was not careful. It was in most observable respects the opposite of careful. But it was safe, not in the sense of the risk having been eliminated. The risk was present and ongoing and would be for a while yet. Safe in the other sense, the older sense, the sense that meant this is the place where the important things are real. She poured the tea. She brought it to the table. She sat down. Outside Portland continued to be shaped by its mountains pretending to be something it was not, and being more real for it, and inside the kitchen the three of them were doing the ordinary thing that is also the most difficult thing, which is being exactly where you are, without the managed version, without the perimeter, without the careful distance that keeps you from knowing what you actually know. She was done with the perimeter. She sat at the table. She was exactly where she was. January arrived the way January arrives in Portland, without ceremony, the calendar turning from one kind of gray to another, the same rain on different days, the year's first light differing from December's last light only in the particular angle of it. The legal process was a different kind of waiting. Claire had organized what she knew about it and kept it updated in the methodical way she kept everything because the systematic ledger was the thing that allowed her to function, to be the person her daughter needed her to be every morning and every night and all the hours in between. The ledger said federal cooperation agreement signed, financial records transferred to federal custody, assets of Cascade Strategic Partners frozen pending final adjudication, pretrial services agreement in place, Marcus not in detention, but with restrictions on travel and communication that were serious and real. It said the political client list had generated its own separate proceeding with 4 city officials in the process of cooperating with federal investigators, 2 others contesting, 1 having resigned. It said the Vancouver component was still working through Canadian jurisdiction. It said the Solon Group's 3 Seattle principals were still not located, which Park was clear about, and Claire was clear-eyed about because being clear-eyed about it was the only way to plan around it. She kept the ledger. She updated it. She filed what she knew, and she organized what she was inferring, and she held them in separate columns the way the system required. What the ledger did not have an entry for was the texture of January itself. The quality of the mornings when Marcus was at the apartment, which was not every morning but was many of them when Lily woke up and came to the kitchen and found him already up with the coffee on and conducted the morning's negotiation regarding the amount of orange juice permitted before breakfast, regarding the status of the weather systems project, regarding the philosophical problem of whether fractions with very large denominators were still numbers in any meaningful sense, with a total absence of self-consciousness that 7-year-olds bring to people who have been correctly categorized. She had categorized him correctly. The ledger didn't have an entry for the way he made coffee either. He was precise about it the way he was precise about everything, and the precision happened to match exactly what she wanted from coffee without either of them having discussed it. She noticed this once out loud, and he said, "I watched what you did the first morning and replicated it." And she thought about the first morning herself at the stove and Lily asking about pancakes in the guest room door at the end of the hallway. "You were awake," she said. "The smell," he said. "I couldn't identify the combination." Ethiopian and Indonesian blend, she said. The hospital imports it for the physician's lounge. They let us buy it at cost. He looked at her. That's very specific, he said. I told you, she said. I noticed things. What she noticed increasingly was the shape of his days. He was managing the legal process with the same contained attention he brought to everything, meeting with the attorney Park, had recommended attending the formal sessions, with federal investigators keeping up the documentation. He was also in the background doing something else. She saw the evidence of it on his laptop when he left it open. Financial models and due diligence frameworks, the infrastructure of something being designed from scratch. She asked him about it one evening in January, Lily asleep, the two of them at the kitchen table with the rain on the skylight. What are you building? She said. He looked up from the laptop. A fund, he said. Clean, legitimate, venture capital for technology companies in the Pacific Northwest. Renewable energy and infrastructure software. He paused. Not what I was building before. There's a version of the Pacific Northwest tech community that needs capital and doesn't have access to institutional finance and doesn't want to go to San Francisco for it. She looked at the models on the screen. Park approved this, she said. It's part of the cooperation agreement, he said. The framework, once the legal process completes. There are conditions. He looked at the screen. Extensive conditions. Are they conditions you can work with? She said. Yes, he said, more than I expected. A pause. Park said that a man who discloses a political client list he didn't have to disclose tends to generate a specific kind of confidence. He looked at her. She said you told her the disclosure mattered. I told her you were right to tell me about it, Claire said, and that I had adjusted my assessment accordingly. Which assessment? He said. She looked at him. The one I make about people, she said. The one I made about you in the alley. She met his gaze. I've been revising it continuously since then. This was one of the revisions. He was quiet. In which direction? He said. She looked at him across the table at the laptop and the financial models, and the man who had spent 8 years building a thing he had known was wrong and had spent 3 months carefully taking it apart, knowing what it cost. In the direction of trusting the assessment I made in the alley, she said, that the math had stopped making sense for a good reason. He held her gaze. The math, he said. The part of me that calculates everything, she said, that has a system for everything, that verifies things twice and documents everything and knows every camera in the building. She paused. The part that stopped in an alley at 3 in the morning and made a decision it couldn't calculate. He was very still. That part was right, she said. He reached across the table. She took his hand. They sat like that for a while in the ordinary kitchen with the rain on the skylight. And it was not a dramatic moment. There was no particular music in it. It was simply the plain acknowledgement of something that had been true for some time and was now being said in the simplest available terms. You saw. In February, one of the 3 Seattle principals was arrested in Vancouver. Park called Claire in the morning and told her and said this reduced the risk profile significantly, and Claire put it in the ledger under the appropriate heading and said thank you and went to work. At noon, she got a text from Marcus. Park told me, 1 down, 2 to go. She replied, noted. Are you okay? He replied, yes. Are you? She looked at her workstation and the medication orders and the systemic interaction she had flagged that morning between 2 prescriptions for a patient in the oncology unit. Yes, she replied. Working? Okay, he replied. That was the texture of February, things unfolding incrementally in the background of ordinary days. The second Seattle principal was located in March, cooperating, his cooperation generating new documentation that tightened the remaining case. The Vancouver proceedings concluded in February with results that Park described as favorable. The political client list proceedings continued to unfold in their complicated way, which Claire followed in the news with the specific attention of someone who has information that the news does not. She did not tell anyone at the hospital. She told Mrs. Nakamura because Mrs. Nakamura had been a witness to the whole thing from the beginning and because the arrangement was not deception compatible after 3 months. Mrs. Nakamura listened to the full version over tea on a Saturday morning with Lily at a birthday party. She said at the end, he makes the coffee correctly. Yes, Claire said. That is unusual, Mrs. Nakamura said, in a person who is new. He replicated it from watching, Claire said. That is also unusual, Mrs. Nakamura said, in anyone. She drank her tea. He is good with Lily, she said, not performing it, actually. Yes, Claire said. Mrs. Nakamura looked at her. You are less careful than you used to be, she said. Claire thought about this. Yes, she said. I am, said Mrs. Nakamura. She put down her cup. Good.
Open.
In April, the legal process reached its formal resolution. The federal adjudication of Cascade Strategic Partners was complete. The financial structure was fully dismantled, the assets distributed according to the court's order, which included a substantial portion to the Pacific Northwest Community Foundation that Park had worked into the cooperation agreement. The political client list proceedings had resulted in 2 convictions, 2 cooperation agreements, and 1 acquittal that would be appealed. Marcus's specific situation. Significant fines, a formal bar from financial industry participation for 3 years, a period of federal supervision, and the cooperation credit that Park had told her about, which the judge acknowledged explicitly in the written order. No detention. The conditions were serious and real, and the 3-year bar meant the fund he was building would operate under a different structure than he had initially designed, managed through a partner with his input in an advisory capacity rather than as principal. Park called her the morning of the decision. "It's done," she said. "How is he?" Claire said. "Relieved," Park said. "And I think," she paused. "He asked whether he could call you himself." "Yes," Claire said. He called 2 minutes later. She was in the pharmacy break room with the door closed. "It's done," he said. "I know," she said. Park called. "The 3-year bar," he said. "It changes the structure of what I'm building. I wanted to explain it to you before you saw it in the news." "I know about the bar," she said. "Park told me the range of possible outcomes weeks ago." A pause. "Of course she did," he said. "I had all the information," she said. "I processed it. I updated the ledger. This outcome is within the range I was prepared for." He was quiet for a moment. Then Claire. "Marcus," she said. "I need to—" He stopped. She waited. "I've been trying to find the right time to say something," he said. "And the right time keeps being preceded by a federal process that requires full attention. I don't want to wait for the right time anymore." She thought about December and the things she had said to him about letting time pass on things she had already decided. "Then say it," she said. "I want to stay," he said. "Not in the temporary arrangement, not while things are unfolding. I want to stay in whatever comes after. With you and Lily in the ordinary way, in the full version of whatever that looks like." He paused. "I understand if that's not—" "Marcus," she said. He stopped. "I know," she said. "I told you in December that I had already decided. That hasn't changed." She paused. "The question now is what the ordinary way looks like. That's going to take some working out." "I know," he said. "I want to work it out." "Yes," she said. She sat in the break room with the door closed and the phone in her hand and felt the particular quality of the moment, which was not dramatic and was not cinematic, but was very real. The slightly uncomfortable break room chair, the smell of coffee from the machine in the corner, the fluorescent light above the table, the ordinary infrastructure of her ordinary job. She thought about the alley. She thought about the math stopping. "Come for dinner," she said. "Tonight. Lily has opinions about the final weather systems project, and I think she wants an audience." He laughed. It was the first time she had heard him laugh, and it surprised her, the specific quality of it, not the sound she would have predicted, lighter than his voice, with a brevity that made it feel like something still becoming. "I'll be there," he said. 6:30, she said. "I'm making soup." She hung up. She sat in the break room for 1 more minute. She thought about all the things she had verified twice and documented carefully, and all the things she had not been able to calculate, and what the difference between them had turned out to mean. She went back to work. He was there at 6:30. Lily showed him the weather systems project, which had expanded beyond its original scope and now included a watercolor map of the Pacific Northwest rain shadow effect that she had made with the focused intensity of a project that had become personally important. She explained the rain shadow with the authority of a second grader who had spent 3 months studying something and arrived at genuine understanding. "So Portland isn't actually a rainy city," Marcus said. "It's a city shaped by the mountains," Lily said. "It only seems rainy if you don't understand the context." He looked at the watercolor map. "That's a good distinction," he said. Lily nodded seriously. "Ms. Chen said I needed a conclusion," she said. "I'm going to say that things look like one thing from the outside but are actually more complicated, and the complication is the interesting part." "That sounds like a good conclusion," he said. "It's true about a lot of things," Lily said. "Joel, not just cities." She looked at them both with the wide-set eyes that missed nothing. "Mom told me you were going to stay," she said. Claire looked at her daughter. "I told her you might be around more," she said carefully. "That's staying," Lily said. She looked at Marcus. "Is that okay if you stay?" He looked at her with the full attention he always gave her. "Yes," he said. "It's more than okay." Lily nodded. Okay, she said. Can I have juice before dinner? One glass, Claire said. Lily got her juice and went to sit on the couch with her project notes satisfied with the administration of the question. Claire looked at Marcus. He looked at her. The kitchen was warm, and the soup was on the stove, and outside the April rain was coming down in the particular Portland way that was not dramatic, but was continuous and consistent and completely reliable. She had been in this apartment for 4 years. She had made it carefully. She had furnished it with the deliberate intentions of a person who had learned what she needed. She had not known what she needed. She had known approximately. She had known the outlines. But the full version of it, the specific form it took that she had not known until an alley at 3 in the morning had interrupted the calculation, and something more accurate had come through. She looked at the refrigerator. The drawing was still there. The gray crayon eyes. I have to tell you something, Marcus said. She looked at him. I looked at the Western Financial Alliance reconciliation schedule, he said. When you corrected the banking timeline in the briefing. He paused. You were right, but the error in Reyes's timeline was also partly mine. I had the schedule information and I had flagged it in my notes, and I didn't bring it to the briefing because I was focused on the arrest sequence. She looked at him. I know, she said. I could see it in the notes when I checked afterward. You checked, he said. I check everything, she said. That's not a criticism. I should have told you I noticed. He was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you? She thought about it. Because it didn't matter by then, she said. The error was caught. The timeline was corrected. The function of identifying whose error it was. She paused. I'm a pharmacist. The medication reconciliation error matters. The blame reconciliation is secondary. He looked at her. You've been doing that, he said. The whole time, not looking for the apology, just looking for the correction. Yes, she said. He was quiet. I'm not accustomed to that, he said. I know, she said. I noticed. He looked at her. The soup needed checking. She went to the stove and stirred it and turned the heat down. And when she turned back, he was at the counter, close the way people are close in small kitchens without it requiring a decision. She looked up at him. She thought about the 48 hours and what it had turned into. You said you wanted to stay, she said. In whatever comes after. Yes, he said. What does that look like to you, she said. Specifically, not generically. He looked at her. Specifically, he said, it looks like this kitchen. Lily's project on the table, you at the stove. He paused. It looks like the soup and the morning coffee and the ledger you keep in your head. He met her gaze. It looks like being seen completely and not needing to manage it. She held his gaze. She thought about the third assumption and all the times it had failed to hold, and what that had finally meant. She reached up and put her hand against his face. He held very still. Yes, she said, that's what it looks like. He kissed her. It was not the first time they had been close to this moment. There had been the kitchen table in the borrowed house and the coffee shop in many evenings since, but it was the first time neither of them had found a reason to stop short of it, and it had the quality of something that had been patient for a long time and was no longer required to be. From the couch, Lily said, I thought that was going to happen eventually. They pulled apart. She was not looking at them. She was looking at her watercolor map with the focused attention of a person too professional to make an occasion of a thing she had categorized correctly weeks ago. Go back to your project, Claire said. Lily said, I'm just saying. Noted, Marcus said. Claire looked at him. He looked at her. The corner of his mouth moved. She thought, there it is. There is the full version. Dinner in 10 minutes, she said. She went back to the soup. He stood in the kitchen and watched her cook, and outside the Portland rain did its reliable thing, and inside the apartment on the Pearl District's edge, 3 people were doing the thing that ordinary life is actually made of, which is not the dramatic moments, but the ones between them, the soup in the project, notes, in the juice glass, in the smoke detector, blinking its patient red every 45 seconds. She had been careful for a long time. She was done being careful about this. The 3-year supervision period had a particular rhythm. Marcus checked in with the federal supervision officer every 2 weeks, which was a Tuesday morning appointment that he described as bureaucratically thorough and not otherwise difficult. The fund he was designing operated through a partner named Nadia Chen, a former tech company CFO, whom Park had vetted and who had the kind of methodical intelligence that Marcus said would probably run the thing better than he would have anyway. You're not bothered by that, Claire said. They were in her car on the way to pick up Lily one Tuesday in May, the day after the supervision appointment. The city outside the windows was doing spring, which in Portland meant the rhododendrons and the cherry trees and the particular green that came after months of gray. By which part, he said. The fun being better run by someone else, she said. He was quiet for a moment. I built Cascade by myself because I couldn't trust anyone else with the architecture, he said. Because the architecture was something I needed to control. He looked out the window. I've been thinking about what that cost. Not just legally, what it costs to only trust yourself with a thing. He paused. It turns out that if you only trust yourself with something, you get what you can build with one person's capacity. He looked at her. That's not actually very much. She thought about the 11 years of being careful alone, about the managed life and the precise architecture of it. No, she said, it's not. Lily was at the school entrance talking to Priya, who had apparently been thoroughly rehabilitated as a social actor since October, and was now Lily's second closest friend after a girl named May, who lived 2 blocks from the apartment. They were deep in conversation, and both of them looked up when the car pulled up with the particular calculation of children who are assessing how much longer they have. 2 minutes, Claire said. Lily held up 3 fingers. 2, Claire said. Lily said something to Priya that appeared to resolve the conversation efficiently and came to the car and got in and immediately began telling them both about a situation in the math work group that had become geopolitically interesting. Claire drove. Marcus listened to Lily explain the math work group geopolitics with the complete attention he always gave her, asking one question at the right moment, which made Lily reconsider the problem from a different angle, which was the move he always made. Is this a thing you do on purpose? Claire said. What thing? He said. The question, she said. It's always the same structure. You wait until she's made her analysis and then you ask the one thing that reframes it. He looked at her. I'm not doing it on purpose, he said. That's just what the situation requires. She thought about that. She thought about what the situation requires. She thought about an alley at 3 in the morning. I know, she said. Lily looked at them from the back seat. You're doing the thing again, she said. What thing? Claire said. The talking without talking thing, Lily said. Where you say words, but the words aren't what you're actually saying. Claire looked at Marcus. He looked at her. We're saying what we're saying, Claire said. You are, Lily said, but not to me. They drove home through the May afternoon, the rhododendrons at full bloom along the parkway, the Portland spring doing its brief and generous thing, and inside the car, the 3 of them were in the middle of ordinary life, which was both the simplest and the most complicated thing, and there was no ledger that could fully organize it, and no system that could fully contain it, and no amount of verification that could make it certain. It was not certain. It was real. Those were not the same thing, and Claire had spent 11 years confusing them, and she was done with that too. She pulled into the parking garage. Lily unbuckled before the car stopped, which was the perpetual source of a perpetual conversation. I know, Lily said, preempting it. Stay buckled until stop. Until the car's fully stopped, Claire said. That's the rule. It stopped, Lily said. It was stopping, Claire said. Lily, Marcus said. Lily looked at him. The rule matters, he said. Not because the specific risk on this occasion is high, because rules that protect you work because you follow them consistently, not when you feel like it. Lily considered this. That's about more than seatbelts, she said. Yes, he said, but seatbelts too. Lily nodded with the seriousness of someone filing a principle that she understood was structural. Okay, she said. She waited. The car was fully stopped. She got out. Claire looked at Marcus. He looked at her. Rules that protect you work because you follow them consistently, she said. That's applicable in your current situation. I know, he said. It was aimed at me as much as her. I know, she said. They got out of the car. They went upstairs. The apartment received them the way it always did. The blue tiles, the drawings on the refrigerator, the lavender from Mrs. Nakamura's last visit, the smoke detector blinking. Lily dropped her backpack on the hook and announced that she was having a snack and then doing homework, the order of which she had opinions about. Homework first, Claire said. Snack first, Lily said. Small snack, Claire said, then homework. Defined as Lily said. 1 piece of fruit, Claire said. Or crackers, Lily said. Fruit or crackers, Claire said. Crackers and cheese, Lily said. The cheese is not a snack. The cheese is a condiment, Claire said. That's a very specific definition, Lily said. It is, Claire said. Crackers and the appropriate condiment amount of cheese. Lily looked at Marcus. She does this, she said. Gets very specific. I know, Marcus said. I find it reassuring. Lily looked at her mother. He finds it reassuring, she said, as though this was data worth recording. Noted, Claire said. Crackers. Lily went to get crackers. Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at Claire with those gray eyes that she had stopped needing to interpret because she knew what they meant. And what they meant was, I am here, and this is where I intend to be, and nothing about that requires explaining. She looked back at him with the same quality of attention. They had both in their respective ways spent a long time only trusting themselves with the architecture. And they were both in their respective ways learning the different version. She went to the stove. She started dinner. He sat at the table. Lily came back with crackers and the condiment amount of cheese in her homework folder and settled in with the comfortable organization of someone at home in their specific place in the world. Outside, Portland continued its May, the rain having paused for 3 days in favor of the specific light that came through clouds when they were thin enough to glow, and the rhododendrons were still blooming, and the city continued to be more complicated than it looked, shaped by its mountains pretending to be one thing while being another and being completely real for it. Inside, the soup was on. The homework was being done. The apartment contained what it contained: an ordinary evening in an ordinary city, in a life that had been interrupted by an alley at 3 in the morning and had become through a series of decisions that looked like impulsiveness from the outside and felt from the inside like the most accurate thing she had ever done, a life that was larger than the careful one. She stirred the soup. She was glad for the alley. She was glad for the math stopping. She was glad for all of it, the complicated shape of it, the cost of it, and the return of it, and the way it had not resolved into the clean answer she was always looking for, but had resolved into something better, which was real, ongoing, hers. She turned down the heat. She called dinner. Petia! The third Seattle principal was located in June, cooperating with Canadian authorities. Park called Claire and told her, and the word she used was done, meaning the operational risk to Claire and Lily was now assessed as resolved. There would be no more sedan on the northwest corner, no more man in a gray jacket outside the pharmacy window, no more woman making fictional visits to patients on the 4th floor. Claire put it in the ledger. She updated the entry to resolved. She sat at her workstation for a moment and looked at the row of the interaction tables above it, the systematic record of what combined badly with what the accumulated knowledge of what happened when the wrong things came together. She thought about the alley, about the combination of herself and Marcus Wren in a loading dock at 3 in the morning, and whether a person with access to the full data would have predicted the outcome. She thought no. A person with access to the full data would have predicted the pharmacist keeps walking and calls security. She thought the full data was not the relevant data. She thought about impulsiveness and what it meant when the thing you could not calculate turned out to be the right answer. She thought about Lily's conclusion for the weather systems project. Things look like one thing from the outside, but are actually more complicated. And the complication is the interesting part. She went back to work. That evening, she told Marcus that Park had called. He was at the table with the fund development documents, which had grown into something substantial. Nadia Chen had identified 2 early-stage renewable energy companies in the Willamette Valley that were strong candidates for the fund's first investments, and the due diligence process was well underway. Done, he said. Done, she said. He looked at her. How are you, he said. She thought about the question with the care she always brought to questions that had real answers. Relieved, she said, and she stopped. And he said. Grateful, she said, for the alley. She met his gaze. I know that's a strange thing to say. I know what the alley cost. It cost considerably less than it could have, he said. Yes, she said, but that's not why I'm grateful for it. She looked at him. I'm grateful because I'd been careful for a long time, and the careful had been accumulating into something smaller and smaller, and the alley interrupted it. She paused. I don't know what would have interrupted it otherwise. He looked at her. Nothing, she said. Probably nothing. I was very thorough about being careful. He almost smiled. She thought, there it is. I'm grateful too, he said. For the obvious reason and for... He stopped. For what? She said. He looked at her directly. For what you made me see, he said. About the distinction I was making between what I could technically avoid knowing and what I actually knew. He paused. I'd been living inside that distinction for 8 years. I had stopped being able to see it from outside. And then, she said, and then I was in your kitchen at 6 in the morning, he said. And you said you needed one true thing, and you said it the way you say everything, like you meant it completely, and were going to hold whatever I gave you with the same completeness. He held her gaze. And I understood that the distinction I had been making was a form of cowardice I had been calling strategy. She looked at him. You gave me the true thing, she said. Yes, he said, and then you gave me something back, which was being held with the same completeness. He paused. That's not something I had experienced before. She thought about this. She thought about the precision with which he had replicated her morning coffee and the question he always asked Lily at the right moment and the gray crayon eyes in the refrigerator drawing. You notice things too, she said. Less systematically than you, he said. But accurately, she said. Yes, he said. When the thing matters. She looked at him across the table with the development documents and the evening light coming through the kitchen window. She thought this is the full version, not the managed one, the full one. She got up and went to the counter and made 2 cups of the Ethiopian-Indonesian blend, exactly as she always made it, exactly as he had replicated, and she brought them back and set one in front of him and sat down. He looked at the cup. He looked at her. Thank you, he said. Just that. You're welcome, she said. Lily came in from her room where she had been doing what she called research, which was reading the weather systems chapter of her science book for the 3rd time because she had found something interesting in it. Did you know, she said, settling onto the counter stool with the authority of someone bearing news, that Portland is technically at the same latitude as some parts of the Mediterranean? I did not know that, Marcus said. So it should be warm, Lily said. But it's not warm because the Pacific Ocean and the mountains do different things than the Mediterranean does. She looked at the window. The geography is completely different, and so everything is different, even though the latitude is the same. Context determines outcome, Marcus said. Yes, Lily said. That's what I'm going to say in the conclusion. She looked at him. Do you think that's too general? I think it's a principle that applies specifically to Portland, he said. Make sure you show how it applies specifically before you make it general. Lily nodded, filing this. Okay, she said. She got down from the stool. I'm going to write the conclusion now. She went back to her room. The kitchen was quiet again. Claire looked at Marcus. He looked at her. Context determines outcome, she said. Yes, he said. She thought about the alley and the context of it, the end of a late shift, a loading dock, a man who had been passed expecting help. She thought about the context of herself, 11 years of careful a daughter, a rebuilt life, a ledger in her head. She thought about the outcome. Yes, she said. She drank her coffee. He drank his. Outside, the June evening settled over Portland, with the lingering light of the longest days, the city doing its particular thing in its particular geography, shaped by what surrounded it and being entirely itself for it. Inside the apartment held what it held: 2 people at a kitchen table, a child writing a conclusion in her room, coffee from a specific blend at the right temperature, and the ordinary evening doing what ordinary evenings do, holding everything that matters without requiring it to be arranged into a final form. It was not finished. It did not need to be finished. It was here and it was real, and that was the whole of what she had needed all along. She had just needed the alley to show her where to look. The supervision period ended on a Tuesday in April. 3 years was not a clean number in the way that certain numbers feel clean. It was not a decade, not a half decade, not a year, but it had its own logic, the logic of consequence. This is the amount of time required for the thing you built and what it cost, and when it is done, you will be different and you will know the difference. Marcus signed the final paperwork at the Federal Building with the same quiet attention he brought to everything, and Park, who had been at every significant moment of the 3 years, shook his hand with a directness that was her characteristic form of regard and said, "Don't waste it." He said, "I won't." He drove to the apartment, and Claire was home because it was a Tuesday, and on Tuesdays she was home by 5:30, a pattern they had built into the shape of the weeks, without deciding to the way the patterns of a shared life accumulate. She opened the door. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Done," she said. "Done," he said. She stepped back to let him in. He came in. He had been coming in for 3 years, and the apartment had not changed substantially. The blue tiles, Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, though they were different drawings. Now the smoke detector blinking its patient 45-second blink, and he moved through it the way you move through a place, you know, from the inside, which is without thinking about it. She made coffee. He sat at the table and looked at his hands for a moment. "Tell me," she said. "It's done," he said. "The supervision requirements, the check-ins. Nadia has the fund fully operational, and my advisory role can move to a principal role starting in 30 days, which is the transition period in the final agreement." He looked up. "It's not the version I had designed originally. The fund structure is different. The client relationship is different." He paused. "It's better. Nadia built something better than I would have built." "You said that would happen," she said. I hoped it would, he said. Hoping and knowing are different. She brought the coffee. She sat across from him. She looked at him, the 3 years of change in his face, which was not the change of aging exactly, but of settling, the same settling she had felt in herself, the way a person looks when they have stopped carrying something they had been carrying so long, they had forgotten it was there. She designed a grant program, he said. Nadia, for rural Pacific Northwest communities that are being underserved by existing clean energy infrastructure, indigenous communities primarily. It's a component of the fund I would not have thought of. He looked at the coffee. I would have thought about returns. I would have thought about the portfolio. I would not have thought about the grant program. And now, she said, and now it's the part of the fund I'm most interested in, he said. He looked at her. It turns out that when you stop needing to control the architecture, other people put things in it that matter. She thought about this. She thought about 11 years of verification and documentation and what had been in the perimeter and what had been outside it. Yes, she said, that's been my experience too. He looked at her. This apartment, he said, it is going to be complicated. She raised her eyebrows. Lily is 10, he said. In 2 years, she's going to need a different kind of space than she has now. And the building's lease structure, he stopped. I'm organizing the future again. You are, she said, but that's not bad. That's you thinking about what comes next. I think about what comes next all the time, he said. I know, she said. He looked at her. What do you want, he said, for what comes next, not what you've planned, what you want. She thought about this with the same care she always brought to genuine questions. More, she said. He waited. More than this apartment, she said. More than careful. More than the version of life I built because I knew how to build it. She met his gaze. I want the full version of what this has been becoming for 3 years. She paused. A house, maybe. Space for Lily and space for work I actually want to be doing, which I've been thinking about. She looked at him steadily. And you, not in the careful arrangement we've been in the full version. He held her gaze. The full version, he said. You know what I mean, she said. I do, he said. He reached across the table. She took his hand. I've been thinking about it, he said, about what I want. And it's the same thing, the same apartment or a different one, the same city because Lily's school and Mrs. Nakamura and the hospital you've been at for 11 years, and the same everything, but more deliberately. He paused. Not because the situation requires it, because I want it. She looked at him. Yes, she said, that's the version I mean. He held her gaze. I need to ask you something, he said. All right, she said. He was quiet for a moment, organizing it the way he organized everything he wanted to say precisely. When the supervision was still active, he said, I couldn't ask without it being complicated. By the conditions. By the way, it would have looked like I was asking from a position of limitation, not from a position of choosing. He paused. I've been waiting to be in a position of choosing. She looked at him. She understood what was coming. She let it come. Claire, he said. Marcus, she said. I want to marry you, he said, not as a solution to anything, not as the resolution of the situation or the legal process or the arrangement we've been in. I want to marry you because you walked out of a building at 3 a.m. and the math stopped making sense. And it's been the truest thing that's happened to me since. He held her gaze. I want the full version, with you, for whatever comes after this. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the alley, about the thing she had told herself was impulsiveness, which had turned out to be precision, about the math stopping and what it had been telling her. She thought about all the small decisions arranged like beads on a string, each one following from the one before until the string was long enough that she could see what it had always been becoming. She thought about a 7-year-old girl drawing gray crayon eyes and labeling the picture us plus the man from the alley. She thought about the full version. Yes, she said. He looked at her. Yes, she said again, because once was not enough for a thing this certain. He lifted her hand from the table. He held it. From Lily's room, they heard the particular sound of a 10-year-old who has been listening to a conversation she was not supposed to be listening to and who has just received information she had been expecting for some time and is now deciding how to process it. A pause. Then Lily said from behind her closed door, it's about time. Claire looked at Marcus. He looked at her. The corner of his mouth moved. She laughed. He laughed, that specific laugh, brief and surprise-sounding, as though laughter still caught him slightly off guard. Lily, Claire said. I wasn't listening, Lily said. You were, Claire said. A pause. Yes, Lily said, but only because you were being loud. We were not being loud, Claire said. Emotionally loud, Lily said. Marcus looked at Claire. She's not wrong, he said. She's extremely not wrong, Claire said. Lily opened her door and came to the kitchen and looked at them both with the wide-set eyes satisfied. Can we get a dog now? She said. That is a completely separate question, Claire said. It's related, Lily said, if we're getting a house. We're not, Claire started. She stopped. She looked at Marcus. We're talking about a house. We talked about a house, he said, in broad terms. We've been talking about it for a year, Lily said. I've been thinking about it for a year. I have a list. You have a list, Claire said. Of requirements, Lily said, for the house and the dog. She sat down at the table with the organized efficiency of someone who has been waiting for this meeting to happen. Do you want to see it? Marcus looked at Claire. Yes, he said. Show us the list. Lily produced a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Claire looked at her daughter. She thought about the 7-year-old who had drawn gray crayon eyes and labeled them correctly, and the 10-year-old who had a list of house requirements and had been waiting for the adults to catch up with what she already knew. Show us the list, Claire said. Lily unfolded the paper. The list was extensive. It included a yard window for the dome, a room for overnight guests, a basement for what Lily called projects. The weather systems project had expanded into a general interest in physical geography that showed no signs of narrowing. And at the bottom, written in a different pen, as though it had been added later, a kitchen big enough for 3 people to cook at the same time. Claire looked at the last item. She looked at Lily. You put that in, she said. It's practical, Lily said. It is, Marcus said. Claire looked at him. He looked at her. She thought about all the ways she had imagined her life going in the 11 years of building it carefully, and how none of the versions had included a specific alley at 3 in the morning, or a federal supervision period, or a 10-year-old with a house requirements list that included a kitchen big enough for 3 people to cook at the same time. She thought about how the version she had was better than all the versions she had imagined. The kitchen is a reasonable requirement, she said. Lily nodded, filing this as acceptance. Should I show you the yard specifications? She said. Yes, Marcus said. Lily began explaining the yard specifications. Outside April, Portland was doing its complicated thing, being shaped by its mountains pretending to be Mediterranean, and being entirely itself and inside the kitchen, with the blue tiles and the drawings on the refrigerator and the smoke detector blinking its patient red. 3 people were sitting at a table with a list of requirements for the next part of what was becoming one ordinary evening at a time, the full version of a life. They found the house in September. It was in the Selwood neighborhood in the southeast, which had good schools and walkable streets and a particular quality of established neighborhood that felt from the first time they walked through it like a place that had been waiting to be arrived at. The kitchen was large. The yard had space. The basement, Lily declared after a thorough inspection, had potential. The dog came in October. She was a 4-year-old rescue greyhound named Sable Gray and White, with the particular dignity of a dog that had been a racing animal and had retired into a quieter life without apparent adjustment difficulty. She settled into the house with the efficiency of someone who had decided this was home and had no further questions about it. Lily named her immediately and correctly, which was characteristic. Sable, she said, because she's gray but also not gray. That's accurate, Marcus said. She looks like your eyes, Lily said. He looked at the dog. He looked at Claire. She does, Claire said. He sat down on the living room floor. The dog came and sat beside him. He put his hand on her side. She did not move. They were married in November in the living room of the Selwood house with Mrs. Nakamura and Nadia Chen and Diana Park, who attended with a dry, professional smile that contained underneath it something warmer than professional, and Ito, who had come from wherever Ito was currently based, and who shook Marcus's hand for longer than necessary and said something in his ear that made Marcus look at Claire with the full gray-eyed attention. What did he say, she asked later. He said she was right about you from the beginning. She thought about this. I wasn't right about everything, she said. I had 3 assumptions that didn't hold. You were right about the part that mattered, he said. She thought about the 3rd assumption. The one she had named finally in the break room of the hospital the morning after he had left the apartment. The assumption was that once he left, she would stop thinking about him. It had not held. She had been right about why it didn't hold. The ceremony was short because they had both spent a long time managing the important things with precision, and they did not need the form to exceed the content. Lily stood beside Claire with the composed dignity of a child who had been waiting for the adults to finish organizing themselves. And when the officiant asked if anyone had objections, she said preemptively, and with some emphasis, no. Afterwards, Sable came in from the yard and assessed the gathered people and decided they were acceptable. They had dinner. Mrs. Nakamura had made something involving rice and a broth that she had been making since before Claire was born, which was the specific food that Mrs. Nakamura produced for occasions she considered significant. Park ate 2 bowls. Lily told Nadia about the Selwood neighborhood's geographical position relative to the Cascade Range, which she had researched. Ida sat with Sable. Marcus and Claire stood by the window that looked onto the yard where the October into November garden was doing its last things before the winter, and the particular Portland dark had come early, and the lights inside were warm and made the window reflective so that they could see themselves in it, standing close. She looked at their reflection. He looked at it too. The full version, he said. Yes, she said. She leaned into him. He put his arm around her. Outside, the night was doing its patient work. Inside, the house was full of the ordinary sound of dinner and people and a dome and the evening. And it was exactly what it was, real and ongoing, and hers. All of theirs. She had been in an alley at 3 in the morning and the math had stopped making sense, and she had made a decision she could not calculate. She had been right, not because it had been easy, not because it had been safe, not because the ledger had organized it into a clean answer, but because she'd been exactly where she was paying the full attention that the situation required, and the situation had required everything she was. She had given it. This was what you got. She looked at the window. She looked at their reflection, herself and Marcus, and the warm room behind them, and the sound of Lily explaining something to Nadia with great precision, and she thought, this is the full version. This is the thing the careful version was preventing. She was glad. She was entirely, precisely, permanently glad. Outside, Portland continued its life in its particular geography, shaped by what surrounded it and being entirely itself and never quite what it appeared to be from a distance, and more interesting for all of that. She had always liked Portland. She had just needed to stop being careful long enough to see why. Duh. 3 years later, Lily was 13. The greyhound Sable was 7, which was middle-aged for her breed, and she had developed a preference for the good armchair in the living room, which was technically not for dogs, and about which nothing was done. The house was the same house because the Selwood neighborhood was exactly what it had appeared to be on first inspection, which was the kind of place that made people stay. The kitchen was large enough for 3 people to cook at the same time, which happened on Sunday evenings, when the schedule allowed it, in which Lily had turned into a kind of structured production, assigning roles and tasks with the organizational attention she brought to all large projects. Claire was still at Providence Medical Center, though in a different capacity than she had been for 11 years. She had spent 2 years thinking about the things she had said to Marcus in the apartment, work I actually want to be doing, and had organized what that meant with the same systematic clarity she brought to everything. And what it meant was pharmacy informatics, the intersection of pharmaceutical science and the data systems that manage medication safety across large healthcare networks. She was building a regional safety database, now a project that had started as an idea she had submitted to her director and had grown over 18 months into something that would eventually serve 7 hospitals across the Pacific Northwest. It was the most interesting work she had ever done. It required everything she was good at and gave her back something she had not known to ask for, which was the feeling of building something that would matter after she was done building it. She had learned from watching Marcus build the fund what that felt like from the outside. She had wanted to know what it felt like from the inside. Marcus's fund had at the 3-year mark of full principal operation, which was 6 years from its inception, invested in 14 companies, funded 11 community energy projects through the grant program, and was currently being studied by 2 university programs as a model for regional impact investing. He described this to Claire once in the kitchen on a Sunday while Lily was directing the cooking of a complicated soup recipe she had found in a food science book as bewildering. Bewildering, Claire said. I built Cascade for 8 years, and it did not generate anything I could point to and say that exists because I built this, he said. It generated capital flows. It generated influence. It generated... He stopped. Problems, Claire said. Problems, he said. The fund has funded a microgrid in a coastal community that had been running on diesel generators for 40 years. He looked at the window. People have electricity because of something I built. He paused. That's bewildering. In the right direction, she said. Yes, he said, extremely. She thought, still becoming. That was the most accurate way she had found to say it. Not arrived, not finished, not the person he had always been, but in the process of becoming the person he was going to be with, the full awareness of both what had come before and what was being built now. She thought she was doing the same. She thought most people were if they were honest about it, but that most people found it easier not to look. She had stopped finding it easier not to look. That had been the alley's gift. The end. On a Tuesday morning in October, the same month, though, not the same year as the alley had been October, Claire was at her desk at the hospital working on the safety database when her phone showed a message from Marcus. Emergency at the fund office. Nothing bad. Nadia's found a company in Eastern Oregon doing something we need to see. You free Thursday? She replied, Lily has debate tournament Saturday. Check the calendar. He replied, checked. Thursday works. Overnight. She looked at the calendar. She replied, Mrs. Nakamura can stay. Yes. He replied, good, I'll drive. She looked at her phone. She thought about driving east through the gorge into the rain shadow country, where the geography changed from wet and green to dry and golden, where the state showed you the other version of itself that the western side obscured. She thought about context determines outcome and how the same latitude could produce entirely different worlds depending on what surrounded it. She put the phone in her pocket. She went back to the database. She worked until noon. She ate lunch at her desk and thought about the Eastern Oregon company and what Nadia had found and what the due diligence would look like, and whether the grant program could extend its geographic reach, which was something she had been thinking about for 6 months and had been meaning to discuss with Marcus when the right moment came. The right moment, she had learned, was something you made rather than waited for. She pulled up a document she had been drafting. She wrote down the thought. She kept working. Outside the hospital window, Portland was doing October in its characteristic way. The maples going gold along the streets, the rain beginning again. After the September pause, the city doing its complicated thing with the mountains and the ocean, and the geography that made it simultaneously more and less than it appeared. Inside, the safety database was growing. The Eastern Oregon trip was on the calendar. The debate tournament was Saturday. The Greyhound was probably in the good chair. Lily was in 8th grade studying the geopolitics of water rights in the American West, which had led her to observe that most conflicts were ultimately about resources that the parties had convinced themselves were something else. Claire had told her that's a conclusion worth writing down. Lily had written it down. It was on the refrigerator now alongside the drawings, which were different drawings older, more technically accomplished the horse in the crayon self-portrait replaced by a watercolor of the Eastern Cascades, and a precise line drawing of Sable asleep in the chair, and a photograph that Lily had printed and taped there without comment, which was from a hiking trip the three of them had taken in the summer to the Wallowas, the far eastern mountains that most Portland people never reached. In the photograph, they were at a ridgeline, the valley below them, going gold and green in the afternoon light. Lily was pointing at something in the distance. Marcus was looking at where she was pointing. Claire was looking at both of them. She was smiling. She had not known someone was taking the photograph. She had not arranged her face for it. That was her face in that moment. That was the full version. She had kept working the way she always kept working, and the life had kept becoming what it was becoming. And the ledger she kept in her head had more entries now than it ever had before, but the ledger was not the thing. The ledger was the tool. The thing was the photograph. The thing was Tuesday's morning and Thursday plans and Saturday debate tournament and the Eastern Oregon company Nadia had found, and the grant program and the safety database and the Greyhound in the chair and the soup on Sunday evenings when the schedule allowed. The thing was the full version. She had been in an alley at 3 a.m. She had made a decision. She had been right. Not about everything. Not always. She had made errors and corrected them the way she made errors and corrected them at work methodically and without excessive self-recrimination, because excessive self-recrimination was a form of inefficiency she had no patience for. But about that decision. Right. She closed the document. She picked up her badge and went back to the pharmacy. There was work to do. There was always work to do. She was glad for it. She was glad for all of it.